Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. I hope you guys are doing all right this morning. What am I missing? Something's going on with the lighting. That's okay. I hope you guys are doing all right. As I always tell you, wherever you are around the globe, I appreciate you being under the sound of this voice, because you could honestly be anywhere else. Having sex with your wife, girlfriend, mistress, playing Xbox on your way to work, etc. But you have found yourself here. And doesn't mean you can't diversify. You can do both things at once. They'll be awkward in some cases. But nevertheless, I don't hate on anybody for doing any of that stuff simultaneously. If you can multitask, God bless you for doing so. I just appreciate that you are under this voice. Interesting news. And shout out to the chat, by the way. Thank you all for being here. Jamarlians. Okay, fair enough, Charles. Where is our president? Where is our president? The president is missing. President of the United States is missing. Now, we haven't seen Trump since I was 47 years old. I was a younger man the last time we've seen actual confirmation that Donald Trump is actually alive and breathing and not stroked out somewhere. At the very least of it, considering we just came from one administration where we had a president that was out to lunch, ended up apparently with cancer that obviously they knew about, cognitive decline on such a massive scale that it's believed that the autopan was doing most of the work. We are now with another old man who seems to be out of it. These pictures were coming up with showing these kind of, I don't know what these spots are on Donald Trump's hands. Eventually they said it was some kind of circulatory issue. Okay, well, fair enough. I don't think circulatory issue, at the very least not limited to his hands, is going to be the thing that keeps him from making appearances, because, as you know, Donald Trump loves the camera, and Donald Trump is typically in front of the camera all the time. So it is a bit weird that we haven't seen him since, August 26th? That's strange. Now, there were pictures put out that Donald Trump was apparently golfing. Those were old pictures. From my understanding, those weren't recent pictures of Donald Trump golfing, so we still have no visual confirmation of where the president is. The president's missing. Last time we saw President Trump, he was at a round table of a marathon ass-kissing ceremony, and it is widely believed that the ass-kissing
singular
was apparently too much for him, and he collapsed immediately after.
This is just such a great opportunity, really, to recognize your leadership as a true champion for working people. And I know we'll hear, as we go around the table here, how your focus singularly on putting the well-being and interests of the American people first is that common thread that we're seeing in your policies being implemented across your administration.
Well, everyone knows there's no stronger advocate for hardworking American families than you, sir. Thank you for the largest tax cut in American history for working families.
Semiconductors. God bless your efforts. God bless your assembly of this team around this table. We're bringing the American dream back.
Mr. President, everybody here who spoke works at the Department of Labor, clearly. If you all haven't stopped by the Department of Labor, Mr. President, I invite you to see your big, beautiful face on a banner in front of the Department of Labor, because you are really the transformational president of the American worker.
At this moment in time, which I do believe we're in a revolution. 1776 was the first one, 1863 or so with Abraham Lincoln was the second. This is the third, with Donald Trump leading the way.
Likewise, with regard to your ability to prevent and to preempt wars between India and Pakistan, between Armenia and Azerbaijan, between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo.
I'm not sure if Ratcliffe knows what the term prevent means. I don't think he knows what the term prevent means. Azerbaijan and Armenia actually did go to war. They went to war. India and Pakistan did go to war. A lot of people were killed in that war. Donald Trump did not end that war. He did not end the Azerbaijan-Armenia war either, just to point out. I don't know if John Ratcliffe knows what prevent means.
In all those cases, CIA intelligence supported you and your entire team in making that possible.
Your team is nothing short of incredible. And there's only one thing I wish for.
When a person touches their nose like that, when they're making a comment, they're typically lying. Let's keep going.
That Nobel Committee finally gets its act together and realizes that you are the single finest candidate since the Nobel Peace, this Nobel Award was ever talked about, to receive that reward.
He is the most, he warrants the Nobel Peace Prize more than any person since the Nobel Peace Prize was invented. That's an amazing ass-kissing session. It was too much for his heart, perhaps. I don't know where Donald Trump is. Nobody knows where Donald Trump is. In the same way that Biden's people were effectively hiding Joe Biden, they seem to be doing the same thing for Donald Trump, which is super, super ironic. That is super ironic. We keep electing these old ass men. Now, Donald Trump was able to get by on the first administration, and give him credit for that. Maybe. I mean, if you're disengaged, not really doing anything, eating hamburgers from McDonald's most of your day, then maybe you can get by without the pressure that's on you. But this time around, not so much. This time around, not so much. If you look at pictures of presidents when they start versus when they end, usually the strain on the body of the mind of the president is such that it wears them down, where you can physically see it on them. It's almost like a tangible representation of the stress of the job. You look at Obama, you look at George Bush, you look at Bill Clinton, all of these people, you could see it weighing on them. It's like Ali getting punched in the face over and over again by Joe Frazier. Joe Frazier actually had it was mean-spirited, slightly funny, but he had this thing saying, I was the guy that gave Ali Parkinson's or whatever. Yeah, that's pretty mean-spirited, but I get it, right? Ali was joking him pretty hard, calling him Uncle Tom and all this other stuff. Put that to the side for the moment. I'm pointing out that for all of the cultists that screamed that, oh my God, they're protecting Joe Biden. This is the greatest, this is the greatest, what the word I'm looking for, conspiracy in the history of conspiracies. That Joe Biden was effectively husband is not the right word for it, protected, hidden from the press, from the onlookers. And that when you finally got the opportunity to see Joe Biden debate, that was the real Joe Biden actually coming out of fruition. And I can't believe that they hit Joe Biden in this particular way. And by the way, Democrats should have been pissed off at that too, by the way, considering that what eventually ended up happening with Donald Trump winning that race. I'm just pointing out something very basic. If you felt some kind of way about them doing that with Joe Biden, you should have a hell of a lot more questions about where's Donald Trump. Alex Jones has come out with a video saying he doesn't think Trump is going to make it to the end of the, I don't think he said end of the year. He's not going to make it the term, or not going to make it much longer. And if you look at some of the other things that are circulating around, like psychics and astrologers, etc., they have come to very similar conclusions that Trump ain't going to make it his term. Now, I don't necessarily need all that stuff. I can get a sense of what I'm looking at in this case. Trump seems more deranged. He seems like he's degrading. He seems like an iceberg that's effectively melting, a lollipop being licked by time and circumstance. And he doesn't necessarily seem to be holding up all that well this time around. The level of stress that's on him seems to be taking a toll on him in a way that it did in his first term. We will see. All I'm saying, very basic, I start where I began. Where is the president of the United States? I saw my guest pop in and then popped out. I don't necessarily know what's going on with that. Alex Jones, please don't quote that slop. The reason why I'm bringing up Alex Jones in the context of Trump is because Alex Jones loves Trump to death. And if Alex Jones is going to come out and say something like that, he's feeling something about the guy that he idealizes and loves. He wouldn't necessarily say it if he didn't feel something in the air on that. Fair enough. They weren't saying that they were going to whack him. They were just saying they didn't think he was going to make it his turn. So we'll see. We will see. Now, my guest popped in and my guest popped out. I guess technically it's 3 minutes. Fair enough. When he popped in, he kind of gave me a cue that he was here, which made me end this a bit early. We can go back to the ass-licking session that was taking place in regards to the White House. By the way, this is humiliating. Like, look, if somebody did this to me and say, Jamal, you're the greatest thing ever. You deserve the Nobel Peace Prize going back since the beginning of the Peace Prize. You and your face is erected onto the halls of labor. You've ended 15 wars over the course of 3 days. How am I supposed to take that? For one, I would think these people are liars. There's that. B, I'd feel some kind of way that they were lying to me about this. C, even if it was somewhat true, I would feel some kind of way that they are going around in a firing line determining who can lick my ass the cleanest. It is very strange. And apparently he caught some kind of bug from somebody's tongue on his ass because the president has been missing.
It's pretty great to celebrate Labor Day with a builder who loves labor, who loves the men and women who built this country, the people that sweat, that have great skills, they have grit. They do the dirty jobs of America that have made this country great, and you know them very well because you have worked with them. The great Trump projects have come from the very men and women we're going into this weekend to celebrate.
And the only president ever to understand it, you understood it in the 80s and the 90s, and I used to see you on TV and you'd say, God, what are these people doing?
Letnick. He's a Letnick. He's a Letnick, all right. That's the one who was on TV saying, they're not taking our big, beautiful cows, our big, beautiful hogs and cows. They're not taking our big, beautiful cows. That's that guy who's like, we're going to bring jobs back to America and we're going to build factories and fill them with robots. It's like, dude, if you're building factories and filling them with robots, you're not really bringing jobs back to America, but just pointing out, just saying. Let me go to my guess. That if that was a comedy sketch, nobody would accept it as real because it's so ludicrous. Shobhan, my man, how you doing, man? You doing okay today?
Hi, Jamal. Good to see you again. Can you hear me? Yeah.
I can hear you just fine. It's good to see you too, man. Always enjoy talking to you. I really do. I always learn something anytime I talk to you. And just for the audience, Shobhan Saxena, he's an Indian journalist based out of Sao Paulo, Brazil, in a career spanning more than 30 years. He has reported for the Times of India, The Hindu, the Indian Express, various other publications in India. Right now, he is an international correspondent for DD India, the international channel for India's public broadcaster. And welcome back to the channel, man. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks very much.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the SCO summit just ended. There are bilateral meetings that are taking place between pretty much everybody that was there. I think the highlight has been Putin, Modi, Xi Jinping and Modi, Putin, Xi Jinping and Modi holding hands, like walking to Xi Jinping. It's like, no. This is not a photo op. We're just really doing this. And it's just the person gets the perfect shot and it goes around the world. Trump flips out over it, all this good stuff. Give me your take on that before I move on to another story. But I do want to get your take on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and what does it mean to you that Modi and China have effectively been pushed closer together as a result of the United States effectively going after Modi?
Yeah, look, Jamal, SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, began, I think, almost 30 years ago, with a very limited mandate of talking about security. It's not an alliance. It's more like an organization, a platform where where China, Russia, and other Central Asian countries could discuss security issues, especially anti-terror activities. Because when it started 30 years ago, there was a lot of problem with terrorism in Central Asia, in Russia too. There have been wars in Chechnya, all that. Everybody knows the story. But today, I think the mandate and the scope of SCO has changed dramatically. It's no longer so about security. They're looking at security in a very wide context, wider context. So that also includes economy, that also includes trade and commercial ties. So SCO basically covers the entire Eurasian landmass, starting from Russia and China, you go to Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey. That's how it's different from other organizations, especially BRICS. BRICS has a similar mandate, but BRICS is a global organization from Russia, China, India to Brazil. It also includes African countries now, like South Africa, Ethiopia, Middle Eastern countries, Iran, Saudi Arabia. And the focus of BRICS have been, finance and economy and more economic cooperation between emerging and developing countries. What we saw in Tianjin this week and past 2 days is basically the SCO and BRICS coming together. I think the driving force behind, with all due respect to Brazil and South Africa, the driving force behind BRICS have been the RIC inside BRICS. This is Russia, India, and China. That's how actually the idea of BRICS started. It was basically a RIC, which became BRIC with the inclusion of Brazil. And then South Africa came on board, it became BRICS, and now it's BRICS Plus. So we see, I think, the three big countries, China, India, and Russia, three of the biggest countries in the world, and China being the second biggest economy, India being the fourth biggest economy, and Russia also in the first 10 economies in the world, and Brazil too. Now we are seeing basically how cooperation between the emerging countries is reaching another level. We all saw the video of Prime Minister Modi and President Putin and President Xi Jinping together, shaking hands, laughing. They are very good optics, and I think this optics must be giving a lot of heartache to people in Washington and Brussels and European capitals, because actually this is a nightmare scenario for them. Russia, India, and China coming together, and with other important countries like Iran, and Turkey, which is a NATO member. So I think this is, I would say, not just the optics. I think the decisions taken there, the discourse and debate and the talking points tell us then how the world is changing. And the world has been changing for quite some time. We've been talking about the multipolar world, and it has been emerging. Now, it's a fact that, China, India, Russia, Brazil, they are important poles in this multipolar world which is emerging. The West has been, either they've been mocking the organizations like BRICS. Suddenly they woke up to the reality of BRICS. Say, oh, wow, this is a very good video. Prime Minister Modi and Putin walking hand in hand and being welcomed by Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
It just really shows the the way they look. They're talking to each other. Laughing and smiling. And in the Western media dubs them in a very different light. But this is a reality, because this is their platform. They're talking about their future. Jamal, India and China together, almost 3 billion people.
Yep.
India and China, just almost 3 billion people. If you include the other South Asian countries, is more than 3 billion. If you include all the SCO countries, more than 25 countries, SCO plus, present in China this week, is almost 4 billion people, half the humanity. So these, they're talking about some very fundamental issues which affects half the humanity. So I think it's a great development. I think now SCO has very bright future, so just like BRICS. This year's BRICS presidency is with Brazil. Next year is going to be in India, the BRICS summit, and President Xi Jinping has already told Prime Minister Modi that he will support India's presidency, and then 2027 is going to be in China, and India will support it. I think so. We are seeing a new phase of cooperation, and of course, this is all happening in the context of the tariff war, which has been launched by the US against almost all the countries. But I won't give too much importance to that, because this cooperation, this dialogue has been going on for quite some time between the emerging countries on BRICS platform, on G20 platform, and on SCO platform.
Yes, but it is the tariff war that has been expediting this process. Meaning, there's a lot of people, I'm not saying it's true, I'm just saying there's a lot of people that believe that India was trying to be unaligned. And I think that's fair. I think you would agree with me with that India's thing was, we don't want to be overly aligned. We want to be able to work with the West. We want to be able to work with the East. We want to be this kind of in between. And, for the most part, there's all sorts of pictures of Modi hugging Trump, these guys having a very good relationship. And Modi seemed to be shocked, like extraordinarily so, when Trump turned around as 50% sanctions. Now, to be fair, Donald Trump had been hitting pretty much the world with sanctions, but he seemed to be particularly vicious going after BRICS countries, whether it was South Africa, whether it was Brazil, whether it was India. He tried to go after China at that one point with 200 and something % sanctions. They just put the snapback sanctions on Iran, not to mention attacking Iran. There seems to be a very specific focus on going after BRICS. And Donald Trump has even mentioned BRICS in a way that other Democrats haven't, effectively saying they're trying to undercut the dollar. We can't allow that to happen, blah, 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 blah. Him doing this was a radical miscalculation. And apparently Modi stopped taking his phone calls. The president called and Modi looked at the phone call and went about eating the falafel or whatever he was eating. Give me your take on this. Like, why did Modi respond so harshly to this in a way that other countries just kind of accepted Donald Trump's temper tantrums? I mean, look at Europe. Europe just bent over backwards and accepted whatever Trump effectively went after them with. Many countries just bent the knee. Why was India so aggressively pushing back on this, effectively not accepting what Donald Trump was trying to do in regards to this kind of exertion of American power?
First of all, I think Donald Trump is the first American president who has mentioned BRICS in his discourse. You know, Obama, Biden never spoke about it. But though he thinks that in BRICS, S stands for Spain. So that's not South Africa, but Spain. But that's okay. Coming back to between India and the U.S., I think the Americans and the West in general, I think they don't understand India. They completely miscalculated. They don't understand the Indian psyche. They don't understand the Indian foreign policy, and they don't understand India's engagement with BRICS or other platforms. India has repeatedly said that it's not part of any anti-West alliance. It's not anti-American alliance. India's foreign policy for decades have been multi-alignment with all the countries. India has good relations, a strategic partnership with Russia, has very good commercial relations with China, but also India has good relations with European countries, EU and US too. Now it has been a change. I've been reading some of the analysis in CNN and other Western media platform saying that Trump is pushing India's into China's orbit. This is again complete misreading of the Indian history. Well, India is not some small country, some small satellite which has to either revolve around the US or revolve around China. You're talking about the biggest country on this planet. It is the most populous country in the world. It is the biggest democracy in the world, and India has a very, very strong history of fighting for its independence from the biggest empire this world had seen, the British Empire. And then if you push that country into a corner, for whatever reasons, I think India is going to, if not going to hit back or retaliate, I think India will take its position in the interest of its people. Now, as far as the trade tariffs between India and US is concerned, I mean, the biggest problem is the buying of Russian oil, because if you look at the Trump administration has been using different excuses against different countries. Against Brazil, the argument is you're persecuting Jair Bolsonaro, so we're putting tariffs on you. What is the prosecution of Jair Bolsonaro got to do with international trade? It's bizarre, right? Then you say against South Africa, they say the white minority that is being persecuted. I mean, you have no notion of history of Africa and South Africa to talk like that, And same thing with India, What the Americans, the bone of contention between India and US is on this tariff issue. The US has been pushing India to open its agriculture market and dairy market. That is out of the question. More than 60% of the Indian population, more than 60%, 65% of the Indian population is directly or indirectly involved in agriculture and dairy. They depend on it. It's not a great part of, it's almost 20% of the Indian economy, but if you take the population, it's really big. No Indian government will ever open its market for foreign producers in these sectors. They can't do it. They won't survive it. And the Prime Minister Modi, he said it publicly. He said, I may have to pay, I'm paraphrasing, I may have to pay a cost for it, but I will always protect the interest of our farmers. India is known as a country of farmers. So that is the main bone of contention. There have been several rounds of talks between India and US in Washington. The Americans are supposed to go to Delhi. They didn't go. And they discussed, India said, no, we are not going to open dairy products and agriculture products. Forget it. And that's why first they put 25%. And then again, the excuse of Russian oil is just an excuse. And now it has taken a bizarre turn, and the kind of language people like Peter Navarro are using on Fox News and writing articles and in Financial Times saying now we're using casteist terms like Brahmins are making money and things like that. This is bizarre, and they're not helping anyone. They're not helping themselves by using this kind of language because, there's a limit to which Indians will take it. After a point, there could be, I don't know how the government will react, but there could be retaliation. I can tell you the mood in India because I'm watching on the social media and the commentary in television and newspapers. The mood in India is very different right now. And I won't say that people are up in arms against America, but people are not liking it. India and US have always had for almost 3 decades, more than 3 decades, good relations, strategic partnership, Quad and all that. There's no need to go down this path, which Americans are going, and it's not being seen well. And by that, I can assure you, the government of India and the people of India will stand the ground, and they'll do everything possible to protect their national interests, whether it's buying oil from Russia, buying defense equipment from Russia, or protecting the agriculture market, and enhancing more cooperation with like-minded countries on BRICS platform or SCO platform. You cannot do that. You can't tell India what to do with its economy. You can't tell what to do with its foreign policy. This is not Europe. I think Americans got spoiled by Europe because Europe just being the vassal states of the US, they do what they're told. As simple as that. And they're expecting a similar behavior from India and also Brazil.
Yeah.
Brazil is not standing its ground. They're not going to retreat at all. And this is a new reality of the world. And I think US will have to learn to live with this reality.
It's humiliating. Like the way Europe behaves is humiliating. And yeah, I agree with you. I think you got so accustomed to Europe being vassals that they just kind of assume that the rest of the world would be vassals. We typically don't care about the historical context. We just have objectives that we want to accomplish. And speaking of Peter Navarro, I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this, but the Modi's War was one of the other things that Lunatic came out with. That Lunatic even went so far as to say that you guys were being, what did he say, arrogant because you cared about your sovereignty. It's like how these arrogant Indians care about their sovereignty. It's just outrageous stuff that is coming out. It's like literally hysterical and shrill, which on some level gets across that they realize that they screwed up. That's my take on that. I'm curious about something else. You mentioned something and made a connection between two things, and I'm glad you did. The SCO and BRICS, and how there's an overlap. There's this kind of enmeshment between these things because many of the same, let's say, the kernel of BRICS is also in the SCO. Now, Lula called for an emergency virtual meeting for BRICS. He's going to be heading it up for this year. Or next year, I believe. So they're calling for the emergency meeting. And in context of calling for that emergency meeting, did I get that right? No, he's doing it this year, and it's going to be India next year, correct? Am I getting that right? Okay.
Right, yes. Yeah.
So he called for an emergency meeting. And his thing is we need to respond, and we need to coordinate and work together in regards to dealing with these, effectively a tariff war that Donald Trump is waging on BRICS countries. Now, I don't know why he waited until now to do this. I honestly, God, don't. I don't know why the rest of the world decided that they didn't decide to effectively lump together and function as one in order to kind of push back on this as opposed to just being vassals and picked off individually. But whatever, he's doing it now. I don't know when this is going to take place. I would imagine it's going to take place after the events in China The celebration is over with, but they're still having bilateral meetings, so it's probably going to take place after that. Give me your take on that. I mean, what is going to be the main? How do you think they're going to push back on this? Because obviously they're huddling to retaliate. It's how do we have a cohesive policy to deal with tariffs? And I love this, by the way. I love it because it's forcing BRICS to come into its own and function as a unit, as opposed to functioning as disparate individual countries that are across the globe. They have to deal with this in unison in a way that they weren't necessarily doing prior. Give me your thoughts, though, on how you think they're going to effectively deal with this.
I think it is part of a larger trend in international affairs. We had the BRICS meeting here, BRICS summit in Rio in July, in which Prime Minister Modi participated. He also had a bilateral with President Lula. President Xi Jinping and President Putin could not participate, and of course, they were very well represented by the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister. But I think most of these tariffs against India going up to 50%, also against Brazil, it happened after the BRICS summit. And I think it has something to do with the success of the BRICS summit in Rio de Janeiro and all the optics of the leaders of some of the biggest countries together. And tariff issue was discussed at the BRICS meeting in Rio de Janeiro. But I think the situation has changed a lot, and I think that is why President Lula is calling for an emergency meeting, because Brazil has the presidency till the end of the year, and then they pass it on to India. I'm sure this meeting will be online meeting and not a physical meeting. But it can happen September, October, or till November, or before that. And I think we can see President Lula with President Xi Jinping, President Putin, President Ramaphosa of South Africa, and other countries, and of course Prime Minister Modi, to discuss this very important issue. I think, Jamal, it's important that the world has learned how to live without US, or they're learning it, And you know what happened? The Brazilian coffee makers, they were facing a huge tariff from America, and the Chinese stepped in and say, okay, we can take almost 50 Brazilian coffee companies to China. And suddenly, and then yesterday, very interestingly, President Xi Jinping said that he wants to open China to Indian products. So if and Chinese have been very supportive of India in the case of tariffs. Same with Russia. I think India and Russia trade is now $68 billion, and they plan to cross it to $100 billion in next few years. There was a meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin in Tianjin yesterday. They spent almost 2 hours together. They spent 1 hour together in the presidential limousine, talking one-on-one. After that, there's a big meeting between the delegation of two countries. So I think the solution to this tariff war launched by the US is very simple. The emerging countries and the developing world, they want to do more business and trade with each other. If you're losing business with America, you have to find new markets. That's what Indians are doing. Indian exporters are looking for new markets. Also, they will import from other countries. So this will see actually more cooperation between emerging countries and developing countries. The multipolar world was emerging anyway, organically. I think now that process has been accelerated because everybody finds themselves in a difficult situation and they have seen through the game. And I can assure you, with Donald Trump or next American president, there's not going to be much change in the US policy of imposing tariffs, forcing other countries to invest in US. What basically you're asking to close down your factories and ship your factories to the US and buy back the products made in US to your country. Are you asking them to invest in the US? Now, country Europe is doing that. Europe is going to make $750 billion investment in the US. They're going to buy LNG for $600 billion in theory. I don't know. They don't have money to invest.
In theory. Thank you. Thank you for putting in theory. I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, they must have said this to massage the ego of the US president, Right. And plus they're taking 15% tariff. I mean, this is really you. It's like you want to destroy yourself to help your friend. No serious country.
We're paying 10% on top of the weapons that they're buying, meaning Trump is charging them a 10% premium on every weapon that they buy from the United States.
Yeah. So plus, 750 billion, 600 billion plus weapons. This is more than $2 trillion and plus tariffs. So you're going to suffer enormously. Okay. And this kind of behavior, I think you shouldn't expect from India or Brazil or China. Russia hasn't suffered any sanctions. I mean, they have sanctions, more than 14,000 sanctions for more than 3 years. So there's no much scope for imposing more sanctions on Russia. So I see a fundamental change. It will be a slow process. Of course, there'll be pain in the short term, because, US has the international reserve currency, and in India, you have more than $100 billion of trade. So there'll be some short-term pain. There will be loss of jobs or things like that. But I think countries will finally find a solution, because the good thing about, you mentioned SCO and BRICS, so many countries are talking on these platforms. And 25 countries participating in SCO, and BRICS, when it happened in Brazil, was almost 30 countries, BRICS plus, and more countries, they want to join these organizations. It's SCO plus, it's BRICS plus. There's now even a plan to have a SCO bank like the BRICS bank. So
that's right.
I think a truly multipolar world is emerging now. The process has been accelerated, and that is the way forward to dealing with it. And we can't sit and cry about, we got hit by so much tariff, this tariff. People have seen through the game. What is the game here? And they know to play this game is at the cost of your national economy, at the cost of your sovereignty, at the cost of the livelihood of your people. No country can do that. So what is the way out? Way out is to do more business with like-minded countries which have the same stand. We stand for cooperation, stand for peace, stand for development and progress for the people, and not these. It's funny that Navarro called it Modi's war, and he said the road to Ukraine goes through New Delhi. The road to Ukraine goes through Washington and Brussels, not through New Delhi.
As for reference, I have the clip. If you want to see the clip, it is. I've been amazed at Navarro. Like, there is a level of mendacity that I think human beings can bear before their back breaks. Navarro doesn't seem to have that level. I thought Donald Trump was a habitual liar. Navarro is astonishing. Listen to him make this argument about this is Modi's war. Now, mind you, the U.S. was directly involved in overthrowing the government of Ukraine. We were directly involved in keeping the war going, putting hundreds of billions of dollars into the war. And Navarro gets out here and says,
it's a lot.
Right here.
Thing that happens, of course, is Ukraine comes to us and Europe and says, give us some more money. So everybody in America loses because of what India is doing. The consumers and businesses and everything lose, and workers lose because.
And just to be clear, what India is doing is protecting its workers, its sovereignty, and just not and choosing who their business partner is. Meaning, India is saying, yes, we're going to purchase this oil. No, we're not going to allow you to destroy our agriculture industry. That's what they're doing. That's what Navarro is talking about. Just want to nail that down. Let's go back.
And says, give us some more money. So everybody in America loses because of what India is doing. The consumers and businesses and everything lose, and workers lose because India's high tariffs cost us jobs and factories and income and higher wages. And then the taxpayers lose because we got to fund Modi's war. Okay. The road to peace runs at least partly right through New Delhi. Modi's war. Let me ask because the road to peace runs in part through New Delhi.
Even the journalist was like, what? Like, he was confused by it. I mean, Putin's war? No, Modi's war.
I think more than anything else, Jamal, this is a frustration and desperation, because they are not getting anywhere with India. And they have tried everything, 25% tariff, 50% tariff, Trump not going to Quad summit in India. And the frustration is growing because, Indians are not budging, and they will not budge. They're taking a stand, or they'll stand up. So I think this kind of, I think for them, this is audacious. A country is trying to protect its sovereignty. A country is trying to protect its national interest. Is audacity. No, it's not audacity. It's a normal behavior of any self-respecting country, and the government, which is trying to, develop and work for its people.
It's rational. It's just rational
I know,
interests. I don't know what else it is.
And that's interesting. I think it was not Navarro's, some other guy. I think he said, "Oh, the Indian billionaires are making money with Russian oil." A government which only works for billionaire class is accusing the other country is billionaires making money.
Did he say that for real? Like
Yeah,
that's
he said, yeah. He said the rich Indians are making money, billionaires making money in India, forgetting that this is what trade is about, why countries trade with each other, companies, state companies, private companies, that's how international trade works, So, yeah, but fascinating. It looks like it's kind of meltdown happening there, and because they're not really going anywhere with all these pressure tactics.
Yeah, it's like a child jumping in a supermarket because they want a toy, and their mama won't give them a toy. It's very weird. I mean, and it's hysterical. It's shrill. I mean, if you have to get on TV and say that, you have to think to yourself, what has gone so wrong that you have to behave that way? That's astonishing. Like, that's a grown man effectively a war that we started. B,
and one more thing.
Yeah, go for it.
No. One more thing. I think you don't do diplomacy in public. These are important issues to be discussed behind closed doors between government officials, between ministers. You don't insult and try to humiliate countries publicly on TV channels. And I remember there's an interview with Bill Clinton with Piers Morgan. I'm not a fan of Clinton, but he said, he was talking about his relationship with President Putin, and he said, Putin kept all his words which he gave to Clinton in private, as long as we did not insult or raise these issues in public. That's how diplomacy is done. The world leaders talk to each other in private, behind closed doors. That's how they discuss things. You don't run government and do diplomacy through, posting tweets on Twitter or threatening countries, and government declarations on Twitter. That's not really the good way of doing it. Have you ever seen the Prime Minister of India or President of China or Russia doing this? No, they don't do it. Don't do that. I mean, this is so if you think this social media pressure is going to make a big country like India cave in, I think it's a grossly mistaken view.
Well, you must understand the U.S. takes a certain. Trump has drunk the Kool-Aid of a hegemon. Now, I know a lot of people think that Donald Trump is, quote unquote, accepting the multipolar world, and Donald Trump we're beyond the unipolar. Trump doesn't believe that at all. He's diversifying responsibility to various countries around the globe. So he wants Europe to deal with the Russians, Israel to deal with the Iranians, and the U.S. is going to pivot to China. But that's not the same thing as I'm accepting a multipolar world. This is the U.S. realizing the limits of U.S. power, and we need to effectively, use other countries kind of like the Romans would use barbarians, because the Roman force was no longer capable of effectively patrolling all of the area that they've effectively taken. Yeah. These are very different things. Trump fully believes that as a hegemon, he can just dictate and tell people what to do, and that he doesn't necessarily have to deal with the normal rules of statecraft. He's getting it wrong. And when you're dealing with countries, especially countries now like Russia, China, India, these countries that are huge blocks of the globe, that doesn't work. This is not the 1980s. You can't pull that off. And I think he's finding the hard limits of American power as he bumps his head hard against these elements. So thankfully, I'm glad. I'm happy about this. Time for the world to grow up. Time for America to get its reality check. On some level, this is America getting its reality check. I guess the question now becomes, what do they do? I mean, obviously, when BRICS is going to come together, they're going to coordinate. How do we deal with America in a cohesive manner? Meaning no more just basic individual countries dealing with America individually. We are going to work as a unit. We're going to work as a group economically in order to deal with this particular issue, to lessen. And yeah, I agree with you. They're probably going to have more trade in their own currencies and everything else. They've been doing that already, though. I get the sense there's going to be something else. I mean, even with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, you pointed out that security has become a larger part of that organization. And they made a concerted note to nail down this notion of the attacks on Iran were outlandish. And this is not something that can be permitted. Okay. But does the Shanghai Cooperation Organization evolve to acknowledge that the fires that are being set around the globe are in large part to prevent that multipolarity that these organizations are effectively trying to bring into fruition? And is security going to at some point become part of ensuring, like, how can I say this? I'm not saying for a NATO type thing. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm pointing out that Iran on some level is a fulcrum for that multipolar world. If Iran is damaged or somehow taken out, as Israel tried to do in that decapitation strike, turn it into Syria, then China and Russia would have a much harder time in doing this thing of multipolarity with Iran that has effectively been Libyanized, for lack of a better word for it. Do they realize that? Like, let's take out BRICS for the moment because they're more of a trading bloc. But the SCO does have a contingent dealing with this notion of security. Does security expand to the individual nations in regards to coming up with a cohesive strategy to keep individual nations secure against predators like the US in this case?
Oh, you're absolutely right. Iran is a very, very important part of the chain, in the Eurasian chain, actually. And very interestingly, the final declaration yesterday, it condemned the American attack on Iran, and it also condemned the Israeli attack on Gaza. So there's a big change from the last meeting of SCO. So I think SCO is a security platform. It's not a defense alliance. So I don't see how countries can actually help Iran on the platform of SCO or BRICS platform, because BRICS is also more about economy and finance and development and growth, not in defense alliances. But I think the presence of the Iranian president there yesterday at the SCO meeting and at various platforms like BRICS, it shows that the Iran has the other countries stand with Iran, and how militarily they can help Iran, I don't know. And it's a serious problem because Iran is a soft target at the moment. They have all its allies in the region have been badly hit, including in Yemen. A few days ago, the prime minister and other ministers were killed. Mm-hmm. But Iran is also capable of defending itself. We saw, in this an exchange of missiles between Iran and Israel, and Israel was hit pretty hard, and then they ran to Donald Trump asking for help, and then he dropped his bombs on, I don't know, some places and claimed that everything has been destroyed, and it was denied by American officials themselves that the nuclear installations were not destroyed. There was some damage, but not destroyed completely. So I think Iran is a big country, 80 million people. It has pretty well-organized armed forces. Of course, they have suffered in the recent months because of the Israeli attacks. But it's a country which is quite capable of defending itself, and it will get support from countries like Russia and China, definitely, because it's an important chain. India and Russia have been trying to build a north-south corridor, a trade corridor, and that goes through Iran. India has invested millions of dollars in a port called Chabad Port in Iran to do business with Iran and also to do business with Afghanistan. So it is a very important country for India too, not just for commercially and trade-wise, but we have historical and cultural relations with Iran going back to hundreds of years. Where basically we speak the same kind of languages, and the culture is very similar. So I think Iran is a very important part of this new emerging. It may not be as strong a pole as India or China, Russia, and Brazil, but it is a pole and country also which respects its national interest and its sovereignty, and they're quite capable of defending themselves.
Yeah. One last thing before I let you go. I have to hit Venezuela. Correct me if I'm wrong. Brazil has, or let's say Lula, I go with Lula specifically, has not necessarily been the fondest of Venezuela, or let's say Nicolas Maduro specifically. The United States has lined up several warships right here. The U.S. Navy has assembled a strike package off the coast of Venezuela capable of launching at least 268 Tomahawk cruise missiles, as well as amphibious assault ships capable of landing around 4,000 Marines. Now, this is weird to me because this doesn't necessarily seem like enough to take the entirety of a country, and yet they're loitering out there nonetheless. And, you know, Colombia's president came out, if there's an attack on Venezuela, what we're seeing in Syria and Iraq will become in the greater Colombia region. Shout out to DG Geopolitics. This is where I'm pulling this from, but it's just the news that's bubbling up at this point. Give me your take on this. I mean, like, what is the thinking in the region about this? The region has to be deeply, deeply bothered by the U.S. treating the South, let's say South America, Latin America, as its backyard, quote unquote, in this kind of imperialist colonial machinations going after Venezuela. It's outrageous.
Yeah,
And real quick, by the way, just want to add one more thing. Part of the rationale that they're doing this, China and Russia both have been making inroads in Venezuela, even investing millions, if not billions, to exploit the oil in Venezuela for them to pull that oil out of the ground. This is part of the reason and rationale that the United States is now claiming drugs as the reason that they're effectively doing this, with all options being on the table. I'm sorry to interrupt, please.
No, it's okay. I think it's part of the larger, bigger American strategy of securing the entire Western Hemisphere as their sphere of influence. So it's Monroe Doctrine on steroids, actually. Now, I mean, there's not been a single war in South America for more than 100 years. I think the last war was between Brazil and Paraguay in the late 19th century. And there's not been there was a war in the Falkland Islands between Argentina and the British forces, but also it was a limited, restricted war. I think this is what the U.S. is doing in the waters near Venezuela is a kind of show of strength, is posturing. They're trying to threaten. They're not trying to just threaten Venezuela. They're also giving message to Brazil. Because the country which is suffering from the highest tariff is Brazil. So I think the whole talk of in the right-wing circles or in the U.S. that from Greenland to Panama and below is going to be their area of sphere. And what happens to the rest of the world, they don't really care. So they're fine with the multipolar world, in other parts of the world, but on their terms. That is their strategy. And South America, Latin America is very, very important part of it. It's not just they're threatening military action against drug cartels in Venezuela, but also in Mexico, which shares border with US, and Mexico, Mexico was on the verge of joining BRICS. And so this is a very complicated scenario. I think this is all, the US foreign policy and European foreign policy has become reactionary. They no longer set the agenda. They react. And this new world order, they're reacting to it because they're not able to influence other countries with their policies, with economic assistance, in any form. So Venezuela was about to join BRICS. It didn't happen because it's a complicated relations with Brazil at the moment. But I don't think any country, probably Argentina under Javier Milei, may support it. I don't think any country in the region will support an attack on this is not Panama. You're talking about Venezuela. They attack Panama and kidnap the president. This is not going to happen. Noriega, saying Reagan. It was Reagan's time, right? Venezuela has a good military. They have Sukhoi 30 fighter jets. They have S-300 missiles. So they're quite capable of doing a damage to. And you don't take over a country like Venezuela with 4,000 with few ships and all that. I think this is a show of his strength, to the domestic audience in Florida, and many factors involved here. But I won't say it's not a threat. The threat is real. They can do covert operations, other things can do damage to. They've been after Venezuela for almost 20 years, more than 20 years, sanctions, and Venezuela has one of the highest reserves of petroleum in the world, crude oil. the economy has become dysfunctional because of sanctions. So if a country, and this is what they love, if a country has its resources, but they can't use the resources for its people, but only to enrich the petroleum companies from the West, that's what they want. And if you don't do that, you face sanctions, military threats, attacks, covert operations, name it, everything possible. So this is what's happening. It's a serious situation, but I don't think a full-blown military invasion of Venezuela is out of the question. Americans don't have the capacity, I'm sorry to say that, to send in ground troops anywhere in the world. Not to Iran, not to Ukraine, not to Venezuela.
Especially
It's just
4,000.
not possible. They can throw in missiles, what they did in Iran, throw in missiles, attack, and damage, from the safety of distance, drones and all that, but to a ground invasion, out of the question.
Yeah, it made no sense. I just didn't get it. I mean, the other thought was, I think Guyana is the name of the country that borders Venezuela with this kind of border dispute. And of course, the U.S. tend to use border disputes as a rationale to get further ensconced into provoking conflicts. And so is it possible that the 4,000 troops are there to back up whatever Guyana is doing? Like, this was always confusing to me. I was like, what is 4,000 troops going to do? And what are you going to do? Just murder people with Tomahawk missiles? Otherwise, why are they there? And as you point out, they're there as a threat and as a signal, even though how they will become actionable is unclear at this point. So, Shobhan, you are fantastic, man. You always get the best breakdowns. You have a fantastic way of explaining this stuff. I can see why you are a journalist and why you are presenting this information. You do it very well. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it. And just so the audience would know who you are one more time, Shobhan Saxena. He's an Indian journalist based out of Sao Paulo. Great food, Sao Paulo, by the way. Great food. Oh, great food. Sao Paulo, Brazil. In a career spanning more than 30 years, he is reported for the Times of India, the Hindu, the Indian Express, various other publications in India. Right now, he is an international correspondent for DD India, the international channel of India's public broadcaster. You be safe, and you have a fantastic rest of your day, okay?
Thank you very much. Thanks. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Jamal.
Thanks, man. All right. I hear my next guest here. I can see him in the background. Caleb Maupin. How you doing, my man? You doing okay, Caleb?
I'm great. How about yourself?
I am doing well. I'm doing well. Dragging a bit of ass today, but I'm okay. Caleb Maupin, he's a speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, and author. His new book, I have it right here, just so the audience can see. Trotsky and the Neoconservatives, the whole story. I am super curious about this. I am very curious about this. You have no idea how I was eager to hear this interview. I'm glad you hit me up and asked me about it. And you can also find Caleb. He's started the Center for Political Innovation. Caleb, that is an interesting title. And just so the audience can see the book itself, you can get it on Amazon right here. Let's put it up for the audience to see. I watched you do what I'm going to call a sermon yesterday with this title for this book. And he was like, when I was a boy, 15 years old, selling the thing. And I thought to myself, I was like, Caleb, how does it feel selling that first communist magazine under false pretenses? Like, I thought you were a college student from the Orville. But no, it's Trotsky and the Neoconservatives, the whole story. And you put, for decades, people have debated the strange link between Leo Trotsky's followers and the rise of neoconservatism, but rarely has the full story been told. And you pointed out yesterday that you had this stuff kind of in your mind. Like, you knew about the stuff. You had already did the research, but you had to compile it and put it in a way that made sense for people. I think most Americans would ask the very basic question: what does Trotsky, communists, have to do with conservatives, or let's say neoconservatives, here in the United States, the Lindsey Grahams of the world, the Trumps of the world, the et ceteras of the world? How are these two things related to one another? They seem to be very disparate. It seemed to be very different politically.
Yeah, well, ever since the Bush years, people have pointed out that some of the top war hawks and academic war strategists in the United States, if you trace their careers back, they were Marxists, socialists, and followers of Leon Trotsky. And Irving Kristol, he's the father of Bill Kristol, the guy who does the Weekly Standard. Carl Gershman, who headed the National Endowment for Democracy, Gene Kirkpatrick, who is Ronald Reagan's ambassador to the United Nations. You can make a whole list of these people. They were at one point Trotskyists, followers of Leon Trotsky. And that is something that's been pointed out for a long time, and you don't really get clear answers about why that is. The standard, the first answer we heard from like Alex Jones and others is they would say, well, these people hate freedom, right? The neocons, Bush did the Patriot Act, it was taking away our freedom, and communists also hate freedom, so that's where this comes from. Well, that's a little bit simplistic. And then nowadays, the reason that this book is getting some play, Nick Fuentes and others are just playing up the fact, well, all these people are Jews, they say, right? And that this is they played like this general anti-Semitic thing. Communism is Jewish. These people are Jewish Zionists, and so it's like a Jewish thing. That's not the issue either. I am the only one to ever just sit down and write an entire book on this relationship, on this strange trajectory that over the course of World War II. And then the 50s and 60s and 70s, you had a layer of people that went from, the far left and the socialist groups of New York City all the way to the Republican Party and strategizing U.S. Foreign policy for the Republicans and being advocates of U.S. regime change wars. And where did that come from? And there is a trajectory, and I tell that story in this book, and I show that there is a little bit of a continuity. It's not a conspiracy. But there is a little bit of an intellectual continuity. And there's a trajectory that a number of intellectuals in New York City, they called them the New York Intellectuals, a group centered around Partisan Review magazine. There's a way that they ended up being the neocons and the war hawks, who now the Trump administration is purging, right? You saw that John Bolton had his home raided by the FBI, and Tulsi Gabbard has stripped these folks of their security clearances. A number of the neocons and the CIA have lost their security clearances. MSNBC, I don't know if you saw, is lying. They're claiming that Tulsi Gabbard revealed the identity of a covert CIA operative. And that's not true, but she can't defend herself because as director of national intelligence, she cannot discuss the status of a CIA operative. So they have an individual who was publicly part of the CIA. They changed her status to covert and are now coordinating with the Wall Street Journal and MSNBC to claim Tulsi Gabbard revealed her identity. That's not what happened, right? And that there is all kinds of crazy stuff going on in the back room right now. We have U.S. warships threatening Venezuela. And on top of that, we have, at the same time, we have the Russiagate, indictments in the works and possibly prosecuting the people who lied. But if you want to talk about neocons, let's just talk about the facts. John Bolton and his crowd of people, the neoconservatives, the people who were trained as Sovietologists in the 70s and 80s, who studied the Soviet Union, they lied to get us into the war in Iraq. They said there were weapons of mass destruction when there weren't any. They said Iraq was part of 9/11, which they weren't. That led to at least 100,000 deaths, millions of refugees, a whole country destroyed. Then they lied about Russiagate. And that lie of Russiagate was essential to the war in Ukraine happening. The war in Ukraine would not have happened if Trump had been able to come into office and reset and improve relations with Russia, if Biden hadn't been able to take the White House with the FBI cooperating with him to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, all of that set the stage for the war that we're in now. So the neocons, they lied about weapons of mass destruction, and they lied about Russia meddling in the U.S. elections, and their lies have led to hundreds of thousands of people dying. But now we're in the possible situation where we could see a precedent set with the prosecution of John Bolton and the prosecution of the Russiagators. It could actually become a crime to do what they did. And that would be a huge breakthrough if there was an understanding that if you lie to the American people and you lie to the U.S. public and you cook the books and intelligence and it leads to a war, you could actually be prosecuted. That would be a great thing. And so what is happening right now, if Tulsi Gabbard can actually go ahead and secure the prosecution of John Bolton and the neocons. That would be a huge victory for America's working families, a huge victory for world peace. And I'm really hoping that can move ahead. As much as it might seem like a long shot, it looks like there's a very good chance of it happening.
Agreed. I hope it does also. I have no issue doing so. By the same token, that same administration that is prosecuting political opponents for lying to the American public and getting us involved in wars and preventing us, meaning I don't think people fully grasp the degree to which the Russiagate stuff had in poisoning the well of getting anything done in regards to stopping the conflict. Where you got like 30% of the country thinking that Putin got Trump elected. And so now all of this stuff is radioactive and you can't really do anything about it. That stuff is horrendous, right? So I agree with you. By the same token, Donald Trump is trying to make this argument that drugs are the reason that he sent a warship with hundreds of Tomahawk missiles and 4,000 Marines and a nuclear sub off the coast of Venezuela. I mean, the bombing of Yemen, I mean, the bombing of Iran, claiming that Iran is trying to get a bomb. I'm not, put it this way, if they're going to prosecute the Democrats for doing this, then they should also be prosecuted for doing this. I guess that's my thing on this. I don't.
Yeah, well, we have to understand the nuances of all of this. There's many layers to this, and it gets very, very weird. There's many layers, but like one layer is that U.S. intelligence has used the Muslim Brotherhood as their main proxy in the Middle East for a long time. The Arab Spring would not have happened without Al Jazeera, based in Qatar, funded by the Qatari monarchy, without the Muslim Brotherhood, the westernized Sunni Muslims, acting as the foot soldiers of the United States to destabilize Libya, to destabilize Syria, to do what they did in 2011. And that, the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas was originally the Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine. It, established its independence. So you have this weird situation where on the one hand, the United States, is supporting Israel. On the other hand, you have this, kind of branch of Islam, of Sunni Islam, the westernized wing of Sunni Islam that acts as, the main allies of the United States in the Middle East. And you have the United States doing kind of a balancing act. And so the Trump administration, there's even talk they may declare the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization as a favor to Israel. Meanwhile, the liberals and the Democratic Socialists of America have basically embedded themselves with the Muslim Brotherhood. And Mahmoud Khalil, who Donald Trump tried to deport from the country for his anti-Israel activism, Mahmoud Khalil was a U.S. intelligence operative trying to bring down the Syrian Arab Republic. And Zohran Mamdani, his wife, is also a regime change activist tied in with the Muslim Brotherhood. So we have this situation where there are different interests. I believe that Donald Trump is threatening Venezuela because he's trying to appease Marco Rubio's faction. Marco Rubio is part of, Maduro called them the Miami Mafia, the layer of people that have been displaced by socialist revolutions in Latin America. And they are reluctantly having to go along with Trump as he tries to improve relations with Russia. So he's throwing them a bone and he's saying, all right, you can mess with Venezuela. You can threaten Venezuela. Venezuela is prepared to defend itself. And Maduro is out there. He says he's got a phone that the West can't even penetrate with Huawei technologies. He's got millions of people ready to fight the militias. And I think Trump is trying to keep Marco Rubio happy. And there are, again, divisions within the Trump administration. He's trying to please the Likudniks and the Zionists. And that's what the whole issue with the protests on the campuses is. The Ivy League schools, they don't really serve a domestic purpose, okay? The Ivy League schools are there for an international purpose. People from all over the world, especially the developing world, they go to Harvard and Yale and Columbia University, and they learn that America is a great place to do business and that the United States is a free and open society where, yeah, we might support Israel, but you know what? We have protests. Muslims here openly protested and disagree with it because we're a pluralistic society. So the Ivy League schools, for intelligence purposes, they need to show the world that there's room for anti-Israel Americans, that they need that, except their trustees and their alumni are overwhelmingly Zionists. Right. And in fact, it's interesting because the Ivy League schools have quotas, racial quotas. Right. There are so many people of color there. There are so many white people there. There are so many. And that among the whites at Harvard and Yale and Columbia, it is overwhelmingly Jews. There is no quota for Jews. And so among whites, there are barely any non-Jewish whites at these schools. And so the trustees and the alumni associations and the donors are overwhelmingly pro-Israel. And they don't want there to be any anti-Israel protests on the campuses. And they are adamant about this. However, the intelligence agencies need that. If they're going to bring people from the Muslim world, from the Middle East, from Africa, from Indonesia and Malaysia to the United States and court them as allies, they need them to see that the USA is friendly to Muslims and friendly to people who don't agree with Israel. And so you have this weird situation where the Ivy League schools are trying to serve two masters, essentially. And that's the situation that we've got. And so the Muslim Brotherhood and the Democratic Socialists of America, on the one hand, they're trying to maintain a relationship that the USA uses for its regime change wars. On the other hand, Trump and his allies are trying to please the Likudniks and the hard Israeli right. It's a very, very odd situation playing out on our campuses.
I do get that. But what does that have to do with him potentially attacking Venezuela? I mean, I don't care if he's trying to appease Marco Rubio. You're effectively threatening another country. Yeah. I watched when Obama effectively was trying to please Saudi Arabia, placate Saudi Arabia because he wanted to get the deal done with Iran, the JCPOA. And he knew full well that Saudi Arabia was lying about the war against Yemen being a week or 2 weeks or however long he thought it was going to be, and greenlit that war, knowing it was going to be bad because he wanted to didn't have Saudi Arabia getting involved and effectively putting the kibosh on the JCPOA, a deal that only lasts for another 4 years, give or take. I guess I'm saying Donald Trump is the president of the United States, not Marco Rubio. Rubio can be dismissed if Rubio is going to take issue with the policy of the U.S. There are plenty of people. Hell, get Douglas McGregor, right? McGregor would be all in on this policy in regards to the State Department. That's not a good excuse for why the president is threatening another country while simultaneously, or for that matter, even attacking Iran, while simultaneously making this argument, I'm going to go after Obama, or let's say Obama people or people in Obama administration, Hillary Clinton, Brennan, et cetera, for creating lies about Russiagate, while he creates lies about Iran, or for that matter, lies about Venezuela.
Yep.
I'm saying that's not an excuse. That's an explanation, but it's not an excuse.
Right. Yeah, it's wrong what he's doing. I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, Venezuela has the right to its sovereignty. They seized control of their oil. They took control of their natural resources. They're using that oil money to build up an independent economy, and they should have the right to do that as a sovereign nation, and to stand with Russia and China and to, do all the amazing things they've done, like eradicate illiteracy in the country. I mean, I've been to Venezuela and seen the wonders of what has been achieved by their Bolivarian socialist government, and they shouldn't be threatened the way they are at all. But it appears Trump, part of his coalition is this Miami mafia, just like the Likudniks and the Netanyahu crowd in Israel are part of his coalition. And so he's throwing them a bone while he plays one thing or other, and he shouldn't be doing that. He needs the American people to be his allies, because the American people hate John Bolton. The American people don't want these wars that John Bolton, in my book, I talk about Leo Strauss. Leo Strauss was never a Trotskyist, but he was an intellectual who became kind of the mentor to a lot of these former Trotskyists. And Leo Strauss and Irving Kristol are considered to be the fathers of the neocon school of thought. One of the most disturbing things about Leo Strauss is he writes extensively about the noble lie, the right, the idea that it's okay to lie, because average people are just too stupid to understand politics. And his favorite TV show was Gunsmoke, a cowboy western from the 1950s, where the good guy wears a white hat and he's all good, and the bad guy wears a black hat and he's all bad, not a single redeeming quality. And Leo Strauss told his followers that's how average Americans should be made to understand world events. It should be that simple for them. We, the smart intellectuals, the philosopher kings, right? He was a Platonist. We should be the ones who analyze the intricacies. But for average people, it should just be as simple as an episode of Gunsmoke. And that it's okay to manipulate and lie to the average people in order to carry out U.S. foreign policy. That is a central belief. John Bolton literally believes it's okay to lie to us to get us into wars. right? It's not a matter of, they lied. Oops, they didn't mean to. No, they think it's okay. They have a whole school of thought. Neoconservatism largely teaches that it is okay to lie. And in Sovietology, in the academic schools of Sovietology, where he was trained by these people, they literally believe that, yes, average Americans should be lied to get them to support these wars. And that's what we have to remember. I mean, this is a school of people. And, you'll remember John Bolton threatened Maduro, said he was going to send Maduro to Guantanamo Bay. Do you remember that? He was part of Trump's first administration, and he wrecked the peace talks with North Korea. Before, as Donald Trump was preparing to meet with Kim Jong-un, he announced that Libyan options were on the table, and basically, put the North Korean government under threat while the negotiations were taking place. And it actually didn't get a huge amount of attention in U.S. media, but Spain has diplomatic relations with North Korea. And shortly after the peace talks happened on the Korean Peninsula, a number of CIA-linked individuals raided the Spanish embassy of North Korea, stole all kinds of computers, trashed it, and attacked it. So this was, if you attack a country's embassy, that's an attack on the country. That's their territory. Right. The USA, the CIA basically attacked and conducted a raid on the North Korean embassy in Spain just to try and hurt the peace talks. So John Bolton is from a wing of the deep state that doesn't want peace with North Korea, doesn't want peace with Russia, doesn't want peace with China, and is trying to prevent the peace talks. And the Alaska summit has the potential to see the war in Ukraine and to see the tunnel over the Bering Sea connecting the United States to the Russian Far East and to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and all the economic growth going on in the East. There's all kinds of potential right now, but there's all kinds of great danger. And we're in a weird moment. But I do believe that people like you and me, we have the ability to intervene. We can try and push the forces of good. And if we can push for John Bolton to be prosecuted, and if we can push to support Tulsi Gabbard and what she's doing, we could potentially open the door to lots of good things. So we're in a weird moment. And that's why my book is important. I don't know if you saw, my book is the #1 seller now in the category of radical new thought, radical.
Well, that's what I want to step into, actually, because I'm fascinated. So give me, if you had to snapshot Trotskyism, just for people to understand it. Let's say you have communism and you may have different schools of communism. What is Trotskyism on that? Just so we have an understanding of what that is, to put it in context, so we can try to make that link to this kind of neoconservatism. Because, by the way, that Straussian argument that you're talking about is exactly the argument that Joe Biden makes, exactly the argument that Europeans make. Russia just wants to take over all of Ukraine. Russia just wants to go all throughout Europe. It's like, really, with 150,000 troops, they were going to take over all of Europe. But they were okay lying repeatedly for months or for years on end in order to make that change the reality of things, in order to justify effectively what they were doing. Joe Biden was doing the exact same thing. Obama was doing the exact same thing. Like, that just seems to be standard political fare at this point for the way that these guys operate. All of them are neocons, by the way. It's a hard difference to see between a Lindsey Graham and, let's say, a Joe Biden in the way that they operate, in the way that they think about foreign policy. So what is Trotskyism? Yeah, let's start with that. What is Trotskyism? If you had to give a basic summary definition of it, and I know it's not going to be complete, but just for the audience to have some kind of general idea on the way that you're defining it in order to make the link to neoconservatism.
Trotskyism is a breakaway form of communism. After the Soviet Union was created, after Lenin and the Bolsheviks took power, there was a guy named Trotsky who was part of the Russian government, and he had a falling out with Stalin, with the leadership, and he kind of made a renegade breakaway wing of communism centered around his theory of the permanent revolution. He developed a concept he called the permanent revolution, and he wanted the Soviet Union to just function as a base area, spreading communism all over the world and marching communism into the Western countries. He felt that impoverished countries like Russia, like China, like Vietnam, Cuba, these countries couldn't really have full socialism because they were too poor. And that the only place that it would really matter to have a socialist revolution would be the Western countries. And so they should just kind of function as a base area to spread communism to the Western countries. That was Trotsky's theory, and it was rejected by the people of the Soviet Union. And so Trotsky formed his own kind of renegade brand of communism that presented itself as being kind of a more radical alternative to the official Soviet communism during the 1930s. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. No, it does. Okay. So your point is that Trotsky effectively wanted, because he wanted this kind of permanent revolution, there's a nice symbiosis or a nice crossover between this idea of imperialistic push of liberalism and this need or this want for permanent revolution in regards to socialism. And that on some level, some of these ideas have crossed over.
Not at first, not on the surface. I mean, in theory, they want the opposite, right? I mean, one is saying we want permanent revolution against capitalism. We want to spread an anti-capitalist revolution all over the world. And then the neocons are saying we want to spread the Western system and capitalism all over the world. We want to permanently overthrow the regime. So you'd think that they don't exactly line up on the surface. But you have to go back to the 1930s. Roosevelt was the president for most of the 1930s in the United States. And Roosevelt recognized the Soviet Union. He established diplomatic relations with the Soviet Union. And he was a big supporter of the labor unions and strikes, created Social Security. And the Communist Party of the United States, that was taking direction from the Soviet Union, they launched what they called the Popular Front, where they kind of toned down a lot of their radicalism, and they played up that they were very patriotic. They would talk about if George Washington and Abraham Lincoln were alive today, they'd be in the Communist Party. Communism is nothing but 20th century Americanism. They had big rallies in Madison Square Garden, with Abraham Lincoln and, the American flag. And then they said racism is un-American, racism is fascist, and anti-fascism is part of the American spirit. And they built this kind of populist movement that kind of toned down the radicalism, focused on American patriotism. Well, Trotskyism was this wing of communism that still maintained more of the radical image, right? They talked about the workers overthrowing the capitalists, the dictatorship of the proletariat, etc. So to be a communist, especially in New York City, and these folks were called the New York intellectuals, to be a communist in New York City was pretty mainstream. The Communist Party controlled 2 city council seats in Harlem. They had a member of the House of Representatives who supported them, a guy named Vito Marcantonio, who represented Harlem in the House of Representatives. And to be a communist was pretty normal. It meant you were supporting Roosevelt. It meant you were, you wanted better relations with the Soviet Union. You were against fascism, etc. And Trotskyism was like the radical wing of communism. It still talked about, about overthrowing the capitalists and the dictatorship of the proletariat, and used the hammer and sickle. And a lot of the intellectual types found the Communist Party to be a little bit boring. They watered things down. They wanted to be more radical. So there was a magazine called Partisan Review, which was a Communist Party literary academic magazine. It went out of business. They just didn't have enough readers. And so it went out of business, but then it rebooted in 1937, suddenly as no longer affiliated with the Communist Party, as an anti-Stalinist publication. And the professor of philosophy, the head of the philosophy department at NYU, a guy named Sidney Hook, was the editor and was involved in it. And James Burnham was involved in it as well. And a number of these kind of like wealthy college professors took control of this magazine called Partisan Review that was purportedly a communist magazine, but it was supposed to be anti-Stalinist, more radical than the Soviet Union. And a lot of the more radical intellectuals that wanted to be more edgy and thought the Communist Party was toning it down, they formed this magazine, Partisan Review, and they were called the New York Intellectuals. And they followed Trotsky until 1939. So what happened in 1939? There was a pact. The Soviet Union and Nazi Germany signed a non-aggression pact. And that was because the Soviet Union had been trying to form a global anti-fascist alliance, but the Western countries wouldn't sign on to it. And briefly, France was willing to work with them, but then France cut them off. And so they knew the Nazis were going to invade them. They wanted to buy time. And so they signed a temporary non-aggression pact with the Nazis. And when they did that, U.S. mainstream media went into an anti-Soviet overdrive. And it started calling the Soviet Union the communazis. Right. And they said that, look, the communists are hypocrites. They're always talking about an anti-fascist front, protesting fascism. But now they would sign a pact with Hitler. The leader of the Communist Party was thrown in prison by Roosevelt. Earl Browder was the Communist Party leader, but Roosevelt threw him in prison over the pact. He was temporarily put in prison over a passport violation. And the Communist Party was pretty widely demonized. And the Soviet Union was viewed as kind of betraying the United States by signing this pact. That's when these New York intellectuals, all of a sudden, they had to denounce the Soviet Union too. They couldn't have anything to do with the Soviet Union. Trotsky had maintained the Soviet Union was what he called a deformed workers' state. It was led by a counter-revolutionary bureaucracy, but it was still socialist in its foundations. But all these New York intellectuals, they had to cut their ties with the Soviet Union completely. It was the pressure of the fact they couldn't go against U.S. foreign policy. They had become communists when that was a trendy thing to be, when the Roosevelt administration was friendly with the Soviet Union, when it was this radical, edgy thing to be in New York circles. But when that put them fundamentally at odds with U.S. foreign policy, they were out of there. And they had to cut their ties with the Soviet Union. And if you read what they wrote about it at the time, and I quote extensively, the struggle for a proletarian party and the arguments that they had with Trotsky, it's wild. It reminds me of today, right? One of their arguments is they say, well, we think for ourselves, right? We think for ourselves. No one can tell us what to think, right? And they say, well, we don't take orders from Moscow, where Stalin was, or from Mexico City, where Trotsky lives. Neither Mexico City or Moscow. We think for ourselves. And their thinking for themselves leads them to support mainstream media, at least, and we hear that over and over and over, right? I'm not brainwashed. I don't watch RT. I think for myself. That's why I repeat the CNN line, right? And it's just the most standard thing, right? And that they're just, they want to go along with the crowd. They want to be on the side of the United States, and the Soviet Union is being widely demonized, and being a Trotskyist would require them to at least kind of mouth support for the Soviet Union. They don't want to do that anymore. And they come out with all kinds of crazy theories. They say, well, the Soviet Union is not capitalist or socialist. They invent this new system called bureaucratic collectivism. It's bureaucrat collectivism. And Nazi Germany is also bureaucrat collectivism. And it's actually worse than capitalism. It's called bureaucrat collectivism. And some of them say, well, it's state capitalism. It's capitalism, except, it's the state that makes the money or whatever. They come up with all these different theories, and they condemn cult of personality and cult of the leader, right? And they say, our intellectual freedom is being threatened, and this organization is authoritarian. They're trying to tell us what to do. They have this big, intense argument that goes on, and the New York intellectuals, they all cut their ties with Trotsky, and they break with Trotsky right as World War II is breaking out, and they just cut their ties. And Partisan Review magazine and Max Shachtman and all these people, they cut their ties with Trotsky. Well, fast forward a decade, right? World War II happens. After World War II, the USA and the Soviet Union are enemies. Once again, right? The Soviet Union is leading, one section of the world in the Cold War, and the U.S. government is against them. And so McCarthyism is happening. The Communist Party's leaders are in jail. The Communist Party is broken up. Well, there's still a layer of people in America, especially in New York City, that are sympathetic to the Communist Party. And at the Waldorf Hotel in New York City, the Soviet Union is part of the UN. And because they're founders of the UN, the Soviet Union is able to have a peace conference at the Waldorf Hotel. And, you think about the pressure they were under. I mean, they were basically, the Communist Party was an illegal organization, and all this, but they have an amazing peace conference, the Waldorf Peace Conference of 1949. And Albert Einstein gets up and supports the Soviet Union, and Aaron Copland, the composer, and W.E.B. Du Bois, and all kinds of people have this event at the Waldorf Hotel saying, look, the Soviet Union is right and NATO is wrong. And it's a big deal, this Waldorf Peace Conference. Well, the CIA hires these New York intellectuals, these former Trotskyists, to disrupt the Waldorf Peace Conference. And they set up something called the Committee for Cultural Freedom, which is supposedly a group that's against U.S. foreign policy and the Soviet Union, but it's actually being funded by the CIA to disrupt the Waldorf Peace Conference. And they intercept its mail, and they go to the event and they disrupt it, and they're there and they're saying, well, we're not for the USA, but we never would have anything to do with the Stalinist regime. But the whole time, secretly, they're going back to the CIA and getting their money. And Sidney Hook, this Trotskyist professor, says to the CIA, give me $100 million and I can create a wave of democracy that'll bring down the Soviet empire. I can find the people. They say their plan is to beat the communists at their own game. And that by speaking against the Soviet Union in the name of leftist and edgy politics, they can create a gap between the kind of people that become communists, intellectuals, anti-racist, activists, other people, and the Soviet Union.
Left.
Yeah. And it's fascinating. So Partisan Review magazine, which is this obscure communist magazine, suddenly it's everywhere. It's all over the college campuses. It is the edgy, radical magazine. And it's critical of McCarthyism, and it's critical of the US military, et cetera. But it really targets the Communist Party. Anyone who's friendly to the Communist Party, oh, they're an apologist for Stalin. Oh, they've got to be opposed. They wage a cancel culture hate campaign against Albert Einstein and against Lillian Hellman, the Broadway playwright. And it's like, oh, yeah, we're going to criticize U.S. society and we're going to be edgy. But at the same time, we're going to smear and defame and attack anyone who aligns with the Soviet Union. And it's the CIA brags about it as being one of their most successful operations, the Congress for Cultural Freedom. And who heads it up? This guy, Irving Kristol. And Irving Kristol, he's considered, he eventually becomes the father of neoconservatism, but, he starts out running the CIA's, leftist program. And his story is, he says in his New York Times obituary, they quote him about why he stopped being a socialist. And he says that he got drafted into the army and that he'd written about the working class, but then he actually met them and he didn't like them. He said, I can't build socialism with these people. They'll just make a racket out of it. And he says he's an intellectual for a reason, and these people are workers for a reason. They're inferior to him. He's a complete elitist, and he really doesn't like the working class. And so the Congress for Cultural Freedom is this CIA program where they're funding all kinds of outlets, all kinds of philosophy books, and all kinds of art galleries. They fund the art of Jackson Pollock, right? Jackson Pollock is this painter who splatters paint on a canvas. Well, a lot of the communist artists are making, art that glorifies the working class and, murals of workers and protests and all of that. And so they come out with the line that, Jackson Pollock, he's just splattering paint on a canvas. That's freedom, right? This art that is promoting workers' struggles and, revolution and all that, that's totalitarian. It's promoting ideas, right? And it's brainwashing people. But Jackson Pollock, that's freedom. You can just splatter your paint. No shapes, no images. That's the freedom of the West, right? And they start, they fund experimental music also, right? That, that modern music, with emotions and clear themes, et cetera, that is totalitarian. But experimental music that just kind of leaves you confused, that's helping you think for yourself. It's like, and they develop it suddenly it stops being, it's not just that they're leftists who don't like the Soviet Union. They're doing something completely different. And they are kind of defining what it means to be left wing as being a nonconformist, and being being one who doesn't go along with the crowd. And there's kind of this contempt for the masses, right? Populism is viewed as a threat, right? And they equate the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. And eventually, they don't like the new left, even though they were originally supporters of the civil rights movement, et cetera. As the civil rights movement became the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Movement, as the campus anti-war movement got going, a lot of them, support the Vietnam War because they want to oppose the Stalinists or whatever. And as the campus anti-war movement becomes more and more pro-communist, a lot of them think that Richard Nixon is the better alternative in the 1972 election because he's going to stop the Stalinists and he's going to stop the new left. And, Max Shachtman, in the final years of his life, he endorses Richard Nixon because Richard Nixon is going to stop the commies, and that George McGovern, the Democrat candidate who wants to immediately end the Vietnam War, he's too soft on the communists. And so you have a layer of these former Trotskyists who went to work for the CIA and crafted the new left. And then they from there start becoming conservatives, and they start, arguing that in the name of spreading freedom around the world, it is necessary to engage in regime change operations. And Sovietology, this academic field that studies the Soviet Union, becomes dominated by former Trotskyists who are using their kind of leftist values that we got to fight for human rights and we got to fight against dictatorship. They start using their kind of leftist aesthetics and the leftism that they learned from being Trotskyists to craft U.S. foreign policy in a very hawkish way. It's a fascinating story, but what is the continuity there? It's contempt for the people, right?
Well, you can see it.
Average people.
You can see the transfer. Like you can, as you were relaying the story, you can kind of see one step leading to the next, where they become statists. Like from the standpoint of the U.S., anything that preserves the state, or anything that's the preservation of the U.S. state, as opposed to these kind of, Soviet Union, anything that inhibits or goes against the U.S. That's what it seems like. I mean, from one step to the next, where it's We're Trotskyists, we back Trotsky, etc., permanent revolution, all of that good stuff. And then it's, okay, we've been paid. Now we're taking this next step into backing the CIA. Then they take this next step, meaning it seems like they've taken so many steps that they've mutated into just something else, which...
Yeah, they still hold on to this kind of contempt for the bulk of American society. You know, they think that average Americans are no good, right? And that just comes across. And that's the interesting thing. And I mean, they just kind of hold on to that. And that is something that they really believe. They equate Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union as being exactly the same, which is an absurd thing to say. But they view them both as examples of excessive democracy, right? When average people get too involved in politics, they set up nasty authoritarian states that threaten the great intellectuals. And that's what they believe. They believe that Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union are both expressions of just the inherent evil of ordinary people. And that's what comes across. And Susan Sontag, she says, communism is nothing but the most successful form of fascism. And she writes about that. And they define fascism as glorifying physical fitness. They define fascism as groups of people acting in coordination, and that they just have this anti-populism, that the masses of people, the bulk of the population, if they get together, they'll set up some kind of authoritarian state that'll threaten our freedom as intellectuals. So we need to rule over the masses of people. We need to lie to them. We need to manipulate them, and we need to do everything we can to make sure they don't get involved in politics, because they will take away our ability to rule over them. It's really a bizarre kind of head game, right? It's like, well, we need to make sure there's no democracy and control the masses of people, because if not, the masses of people will take away our freedom and they'll form a mass. I mean, it becomes like a dog chasing its tail, right? Like, do you want democracy or not? Do you want freedom or not? Right? So we got to take away freedom to make sure that we don't have too much freedom, because the masses of people, if they use that freedom, they'll want to take away our freedom. It starts not making any sense. But, at the core of it is this belief that average people are just bad, that humanity is evil, right? They are anti-human. And they view fascism and communism as rooted in some inherent authoritarian drive within people that makes people dangerous. And that is basically what they believe. And they still believe that. And they believe that it's the duty of the United States to overthrow governments that they would equate with Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union, and to create a society where the kind of elite intellectuals can rise up to the top without being interfered with. And that's what they believe. And that's neoconservatism. And it's interesting because that is largely a view that you could argue is rooted in Friedrich Nietzsche and his talk of philosophical irrationalism. Friedrich Nietzsche, he argued that, there were some people that are just superior. He called them the Übermenschen, right? The superior ones. And he argued that they are persecuted by the mob, by the average people. And that the Übermenschen doesn't believe in objective truth and thinks he can invent his own truth with his own mind. And the Übermenschen doesn't want to be restricted by the rules and traditional morality, right and wrong, etc., and writes his own moral and ethical code. And that any attempt to say that right and wrong do exist, any attempt to say that objective truth does exist, is actually totalitarianism, and it's the mob trying to threaten the Übermenschen and hold back the Übermenschen. And so the Übermenschen is a hero by deconstructing, by just taking things apart. And that's the role that an ethical person plays, is they take apart and they deconstruct narratives, right? This is postmodernism, right? You talk about postmodernism. It's the idea that deconstruction and just taking apart narratives and taking apart narratives and destroying any notion of truth, any notion of right and wrong, is the only heroic role that one can play in history. This is what the neocons believe, and it's philosophical irrationalism. And it's interesting because this is also what the new left believes. These people created the new left, and then they became neocons. It's like they're the same folks. And it is this worship of the individual, this contempt for society above all else. And it really defines U.S. foreign policy. And the American people have rejected it. But these people have a grip over the intelligence agencies. They have a grip over the academic institutions that train the people that craft U.S. foreign policy. The American people have rejected them, and we need to talk about it, right? And now, as I see Tulsi Gabbard going after John Bolton and going after the Russia Gators, we have to talk about who these folks are. We have to talk about who the neocons, the former Trotskyists, and who they are and where they came from.
but these sound also just like liberals. Like in many respects, they also sound like liberals. I mean, take out domestic policy for the moment, like whether you want healthcare, whether you don't want healthcare, whether you want, $15 an hour minimum wage or not. Let's say those are items that you add to it, but let's take those out. At the core basics of it, how is this different than any rando Democrat? As opposed to, like, if you make an argument and say, hey, it is perfectly okay to overthrow Libya, sodomize Gaddafi with a machete, and you have Hillary Clinton giggling, we came, we saw, he died. Okay, how's it different than John Bolton? I don't see the difference.
Yeah. And
what methodology, mindset.
Yeah, well, what does it mean to be conservative? That raises some questions, right? In America, to be a conservative has just kind of come to mean you're a worshiper of money. You're a worshiper of capitalism, right? But conservatism generally means traditionalism, right? It means you love the family, you love the nation, you love the community, and you view liberals as kind of taking those things apart by pushing their radical individualism. That's what conservatism traditionally means. It doesn't mean that in America anymore. It just means you worship capitalism, you worship the free market, and maybe you like these wars because they'll spread capitalism, they'll spread the free market, they'll oppose the commies or whatever. And that American conservatism, and this has been pointed out by a number of people, American conservatism is really kind of an invention. It's something that was invented during the time of McCarthyism. It was this kind of ideology of anti-communism that was kind of a hodgepodge of different, free market ideology, the celebration of the free market, anti-communism, maybe some flag waving, maybe some, Bible thumping or whatever. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really have anything that it really stands for. And this is, the new right, the neoconservatives, as conservatism is being reinvented during the Cold War, it becomes something that's not really conservative, so to speak. And especially if you're spreading revolution all over the world and tearing down different nations and you're spreading free trade all across the planet. And if on top of that, you're connecting the whole world with free trade, and and if you're doing it in the name of feminism and liberating the women and liberating LGBT, it doesn't sound very conservative to me. But that's what kind of American conservatism has meant. And what's weird is, like, as you pointed out, the Democrats believe this too. And that it used to be during the Cold War, the USA fought communist governments on the basis of them being anti-Christian, of the basis of them opposing the free market. But during the 80s and 90s, they realized that to sell these wars, you had to hijack leftist narratives, make it about feminism, make it about protecting the women. Instead of having it be a U.S. invasion, have it be a color revolution where there's people in the streets fighting for freedom, and that hijacking the aesthetics of leftism is a much more effective way of selling war. And that's the neocons. They were leftists, they were Trotskyists, and they realized that the aesthetics and the feelings that accompanied their leftist politics were more effective in building the case for war than traditional conservative war narratives.
I guess I'm saying, Caleb, that this seems to be just American policy. Like, I know you're saying neoconservatism, but that neoconservatism label seems to fit very well with either political party. I mean, let's take it to Europe, for example. The overthrow of Georgia, where they were trying to have a color revolution in Georgia. The overthrow of Ukraine, where they were having the color revolution in Ukraine. The way the European Union is effectively bigfooting the various governments, either the ADF that's taking place in Germany, but Marine Le Pen's party, the National Rally, where they're effectively putting people or trying to threaten to put people in jail in order to get them off the political stage. They seem to be perfectly okay with creating myths in order to justify the things that they're doing politically, and the characterization that you are effectively making about neoconservatives that fit firmly within both political parties. Yeah. Again, I can bring up the Hillary Clinton thing. We can go to the Joe Biden issue. That seems to fit as comfortably with a Lindsey Graham, a John Bolton, et cetera, as with a Hillary Clinton, a Joe Biden. All of these people have very similar ideologies in regards to what they want to do around the globe, and this notion of spreading American power around the globe. All of these people were okay with knocking over Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, and trying to go after Iran. That was a mutual project that was taking place by both political parties. So, I mean, are we just using the term neoconservatives in the context that that can be either political party, either political faction that seem to just both agree that this is American policy at this point?
I mean,
Or correct me if I'm
neoconservatism
wrong.
refers to a specific school of people, but Anne Marie Slaughter, you read her writings, she's a neocon, and she was Hillary Clinton's top advisor. She runs the New America Foundation, and you read what she wrote in Foreign Affairs in her essay on the power of populism about how populist regimes are the main threat. Populism, not authoritarian regimes, populist regimes, regimes that build kind of mass movements to back them up. They're the main threat. And that the USA must support revolutions around the world to spread the open international system. I mean, that's neoconservatism. You know, and what's weird is that as things change, the financial crisis was really the moment where the neocon messaging in the Republican Party kind of died, right? 2008, it became very, very hard to hold the Republican Party together and have the Republican Party win elections with neocon messaging. And that's when we saw a shift of these kind of regime change activists and big oil, ExxonMobil and others, you know, just putting their support behind the Democratic Party instead. For a number of reasons. The demographics of the United States have changed. The economy was doing a lot worse, and that traditional neoconservatism kind of relies on this old-fashioned, you know, my country, right or wrong. If you don't like it here, why don't you move to another country? You know, don't fix it if it ain't broke. And you can't do that anymore. I mean, people lost their homes all across the heartland of America. People felt that the government was corrupt, and that traditional Cold War neoconservatism, after the political crisis of the 1960s, you had a kind of a rebranding of what it meant to be a conservative or a Republican that was very effective, that basically said, you know, the civil rights movement and the black liberation movement and all these hippies protesting, well, they need to cut it out and get over it. And, you know, America is the greatest country in the world. And if you got a problem with that, you should move to another country. And you know, that was the neocon messaging style. And it just fell out. I mean, it just wasn't going to work anymore. It wasn't popular. And the neocons were kind of out of power. And Zbigniew Brzezinski, you know, he disapproved of the axis of evil speech that George W. Bush gave. That was kind of viewed as the height of neoconservative influence, because Bush listed three governments, North Korea, Iran, and Iraq, and he said they constitute an axis of evil. And Brzezinski, who is definitely an advocate of opposing Russia, you know, worked in the Carter administration, et cetera, he denounced that because he said, look, that's not strategic. If you just declare governments to be evil, you can't negotiate with them ever. And that Obama, you know, he was largely around Zbigniew Brzezinski and kind of the geostrategic liberal school. It was a little bit different than the neocons, right? That they have a little bit of a different approach. They're more about cultivating proxies, you know, to utilize them. You know, people like the Muslim Brotherhood, and using them to carry out regime change operations. They kind of play a global chess game where they align with different forces, they manipulate different forces. That's the more liberal, geopolitical school of foreign policy. Whereas the neocons, they are on a mission to destabilize and overthrow governments. It's a moral question for them. You know, there's an axis of evil, and they have got to spread Western values by overthrowing it. And Obama's presidency was kind of, you know, as the neocons had kind of lost their grip, they were kind of on the defensive. And Obama, who studied at Columbia University under the Brzezinski school, right? The Columbia University School of International, you know, Relations. That is very much where Brzezinski comes out of. They came in and they were saying, look, the neocon way of doing things, this kind of self-righteous crusade, it's not a winning strategy. But still, I mean, for decades, they had dominance in how people were trained in foreign policy. And, you know, the Hillary Clinton State Department was full of neoconservatives, et cetera. So, I mean, there are different strategies and layers within our deep state, and they ultimately want the same thing. I mean, they want to push back the power of Russia and China, secure the dominance of Wall Street around the world. But there are different strategies about how to do so, I think, and that the neocon formula kind of lost its ability to win elections and to dominate the Republican Party with the rise of Obama. And so there's been kind of a reshuffling. And you could argue that wokeism is almost like a rebrand of neoconservatism, right? It's rebranding neoconservatism, not to sell it to white middle class people in the suburbs, but rather to sell it to young urban professionals in the cities, right? And young hipster kind of woke people. It's the same thing. We're on a crusade to spread freedom, except it presents itself a little bit differently. And it used to be that, the young urban professionals were more free thinking and critical of U.S. foreign policy. Whereas it was, your average, folks in the suburbs, your white working class, white middle class folks in the suburbs that were the ones that said, love it or leave it, and supported all the wars. Now it's flipped. Now your young urban hipsters think that they're smart because they read the New York Times and they think that we have to oppose Russia. Whereas your folks in the suburbs, they think that, it's not our business and things are not going too well over here and living standards are dropping. And so maybe we should focus on America first. And so it's weird. And I've talked on here before about how I hated college, but my whole family told me, college is going to be amazing. You're going to love college. Well, yeah, if I had gone to the college that my parents went to in the 60s, yeah, I would have loved it because college played a different role. College used to be where people thought more critically. Now, in our new age, college is where you go to get vetted to make sure you repeat the party line. And among the population at large, people are questioning things. People are looking into ideas they call conspiracy theories and challenging official narratives. But in the academic institutions, you're vetted. You're told that, you are made sure that you will repeat the party line. And so like the role of the institutions and academia has changed. A lot has changed in U.S. society. This isn't the country it was during the Cold War, and a lot of things have just kind of shifted in the role that they play.
Caleb, this is fascinating. This is completely fascinating. Yeah, because you're right. On its face, these two things seem opposite. But you can see how this kind of mutation took effect, where it transferred from one thing into something else. I mean, what do you say about this notion of just being, these are just issues of power? How do you maintain power? How do you project power? And the ideology that you've convinced yourself of in order to kind of project that power. Because if they hate people, then what is the point of taking over another country, right? And yet they do. And they come up with the justification to take over this country and that country and this kind of geopolitical expansion of this game of primacy that they seem to want to effect. This is both political parties. This seems to be just the American ethos in the way that we operate around the world. And I agree with you, the neoconservatism thing, it's an interesting pivot from one to the other. And you can see this kind of line going from one to the other. But ultimately, this really is just about power, right?
Yeah, I mean, when it really gets down to it, it's almost like they worked backwards, right? They already knew what the conclusion would be, but the question is, how do we reach that conclusion? So an ideology is made up, kind of to reach the conclusion. The world at this point is ruled by Wall Street and London, and they don't want competitors, right? China used to be one of the poorest countries in the world. Now they make half the world's steel. Now Huawei makes way better phones than Apple. China's now a competitor. So we got to push China off the stage because we want Wall Street to dominate the world. Russia, at the time of the fall of the Soviet Union, they were a very poor country, but Putin fixed things up, and he put oil and gas at the center of their economy, and now Russia is selling oil and gas all over the world, and they're competing with ExxonMobil and BP and Shell and Chevron, and they've lifted people out of poverty, and they're part of the Eurasian Economic Union and this new economy that's rising. So big oil and the big bankers in the West say we got to push Russia off the stage. And so if you want to advance in academia, if you want to advance in mainstream media, you say what the people with the money want to hear, which is we got to get those Russians, we got to get those Chinese, we got to get those Venezuelans, we got to get those Iranians. And what really happened is that there was a layer of people that were calling themselves communists, that were Trotskyite communists, that learned that they could take aspects of what they believed as radicals and use them to serve the power structure. And they could do so effectively, and that to advance their careers and to get the grant money and the book deals and to get the appointments as advisors to government officials and to get the good jobs training the future State Department employees. They could take some of the values that they'd learned from Trotskyite communism and apply them to what the power structure wanted to hear. And it was a very effective formula. Who would have thought, right? You would have thought that just hating communism, just hating anything to do with Marxism would be the effective way of doing it. But if you take some of the principles that Trotsky believed in, some of the principles of Marx and Lenin, and you turn them on their head and you weaponize them to serve the Western system, why you can become the best, the best preacher of and the best mobilizer and the best effective analyst for the Western system. And that's kind of what they realized, and that there's a weird game of that, right? They talk about jiu-jitsu, right? The fighting style. It's where you like use your enemy's strength against him, right? And that there's an element of that, right? Where it's like, the one side does something, so the other side imitates it and does it another way. And you see this in all kinds of fields of politics and art and all of that. As people are competing with each other and all of that, they draw from each other. They take one thing that the other side is doing and they reverse it and they imitate it. I mean, these are the games that are played. There's a duality in the universe, right? That's Marx's the dialectic, right? That there's two sides clashing, and as they clash, they reinvent each other, they imitate each other, and this is part of the game. And that neoconservatism was kind of, as the USA was fighting communism around the world, they developed their own kind of weird revolutionary communistic worldview to fight communism. I mean, that's kind of the nature of the universe, the duality that exists. And that's how the USA was able to win the Cold War. Instead of fighting communists on the basis of communism bad, capitalism good, they took some of the feelings and emotions and passion that communists appealed to and weaponized it against the communists. And that's how they were able to win the Cold War. And that's where neoconservatism comes from.
I'm curious, do you think they know that? Do the John Boltons of the world know that ultimately elements of his ideas because you're right. Like, I have a knife, you have a knife. The only difference is why we're using it. I'm using it for defense, you're using it to attack, etc. In which case, I'm more right because I'm defending. Like, meaning tools of the trade are effectively the same. The tools at your disposal in any kind of war and any kind of fight are very similar. It's usually the ideas that are different. I'm curious, do you think that these guys know what you just explained very well, by the way, in this hour that we've had together?
Well, their professors did. I mean, John Bolton was never a Trotskyist. He was a young guy who supported the Vietnam War, went into the military, went into academia, and he was trained by former Trotskyists, and he was trained by the neocons who ran the Sovietology schools. They certainly knew what they were doing. And I'm sure, they taught, when they were teaching Sovietology, they taught the Soviet ideology, and they said, this is what the Soviets believe. And, and they taught about the Stalin-Trotsky disagreement. So I wouldn't be surprised. John Bolton probably knows this history to some degree or other. I don't know if he cares as much. His professors probably cared. His professors and the people who set up, what is now called neoconservatives, they cared to some degree. There's a great PBS documentary called Arguing the World that kind of traces the career of four of these, New York intellectuals, Irving Howe, who ended up founding DSA, and Irving Kristol, who ended up, being the father of neoconservatism. And it kind of traces their trajectory. So I think they know this history to some degree or other, but I don't think they care. They're concerned about their careers, right? It's about getting ahead. It's about getting your face on CNN. It's about getting the book deals. It's about getting appointed and getting good jobs in DC and in the administration. And, these neocons had a clever way of doing it. They knew leftism, and they were able to kind of pull what they knew from leftism and apply it to advance their careers in the American imperialist power structure. I think that's really all there is to it.
Caleb, I'm illuminated. This has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you for this. And just so the audience can see your book, the name of the book is right here. Trotsky and the Neoconservatives, the whole story. This is just a taste of what is in the book. He gives a good breakdown in this video, but the book is going to go into far more detail to explain how that link is established, how that link is created. Caleb, great work. As always, I always tell people your breadth of knowledge is always impressive, man. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it. You be
always a pleasure.
Oh, by the way, just so the audience would know, I almost let you go without giving your bio. Caleb Maupin, speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, author, and of course, new book, Trotsky and the Neoconservatives, the whole story. You can also find Caleb. He created the Center for Political Innovation. Definitely check them out there. They have protests, they have marches, they have all sorts of rallies all over the United States. Caleb, you are fantastic, man. Thank you for this.
Thank you. You're great. And Yeah, it's been fun. Talk to you soon.
Have a good one. Thank you. All right. I have a new guest. Caleb is great, by the way. Yeah, Caleb is great. I have a new guest. First time she's on the show. And I want to make sure I get your name right. So please pronounce it for me. Well, no, screw that. I'm going to take the risk. Kayse Melone. Can't hear you, Kayse. Can't hear you. Your mic. You're muted. Try now. You're still muted. Still muted. I can see it. I can see your. Hold on. Let me see if I can help you out. People. Yeah, I can't change it. You're muted on your end.
Is it just technical difficulties?
There you are. There you are.
Okay,
now
great.
Yeah,
Yes,
you were muted before.
You were close. It's Kayse Melone. So
Kayse
just regular
Melone.
Malone, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Kayse Melone. Kayse Melone. I can remember. I am a butcher of names, so I'm I always try to get it right. Kayse Melone. She runs the Kayse Melone Show. She's described as a podcast for free thinkers, free spirits, covering culture, religion, and politics. Her show comes on Sunday, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Central Time. How are you doing this morning? How are you doing this morning? I had to get my time straight for a moment in my mind.
No, I hear
okay?
you. We're busy. We're all busy. We're all trying to adjust to time, right? I'm well. It's been a good long weekend for me. I know not everyone gets a long weekend on Labor Day, but you just had a birthday, right?
I did just have a birthday. I am a 48-year-old man now.
48
August
years
31st.
young is what I heard.
No, it's old. So, August 31st. That was on Sunday, and then for Labor Day we ended up doing the show on Labor Day also.
Okay.
So, it was good. So far, so good. I can't hate it. It was a bit of a mess for Airbnb on that day, but everything worked out exactly the way I needed or wanted it to. Airbnb, shout out to them for hooking me up. So far, so good. Yeah, it was a good birthday. I can't complain.
Good. Glad to hear it.
Thank you for joining me, by the way. I really do appreciate it.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You did a show on Christian Zionism, and I had the opportunity to watch that show, and I was fascinated by that show. Now, I've had one of my previous guests, you know her actually, Jen Perlman. Jen did this show. She did my show once, and she was talking about how it was growing up as a Zionist. And the audience was riveted by it because it was effectively just brainwashing a child. Like, you're indoctrinating that kid with ideas to such a degree. When the kid grows up, the kid kind of holds those ideas. It's like if you grew up a Christian or you grew up a Muslim or grew up something else. Well, in this case, you're putting pretty hateful ideas into that child, and it takes a while for the child to kind of shake that off. You were talking about growing up as a American, what does it call it? A Christian Zionist, which is always weird to me, because give me a definition of that before I jump into that. What is a Christian Zionist in the way that you explain it?
Sure. So that's a great starting question. Before I jump into it, love Jen. Jen is great.
Jen is awesome. Yeah.
Also been on the Revolutionary Change podcast, which was also called Generational Change. Love it.
She got very militant.
Yeah.
Very militant.
Yeah.
She came on the show spitting fire that day. I've known Jen for a while, and I remember when it was generational change, it was very lighthearted. So, like, as the world got darker, she accommodated that new world.
Yeah, it's like she started burning brighter. Love to see it.
Yes.
So that was a great connection that I made with Jen, and what we kind of found fascinating in our backgrounds and our upbringing is that we were both essentially, as you were saying, raised as Zionists, but mine was not from a Jewish perspective, which one of the really, I guess, kind of oversimplified ways of breaking down the differences between Jewish Zionism and Christian Zionism is that one is more political in nature and one is more religious in nature. There are some overlap there. There are political aspects to Christian Zionism, and there are some religious undertones to some, not all, iterations of Jewish Zionism, but that's just still kind of an easily oversimplified distinction there. I kind of use a very general overview in defining Christian Zionism, which is that it is the unwavering support for the exclusive rights to the land in Israel/Palestine for the Jewish people. So for Christians, or I should have started that with saying the Christian support for that exclusive right. And so for Christians, the everyday Christians in this country, around 2/3 of people in the United States would check a box and say that they're a Christian. Now that's a wide umbrella of a million different versions there, right? Denominations, the intensity of one's Christianity, you know, are we talking fundamentalist? Are we talking progressive? There's a whole world.
Yeah.
But in that group of people who would check the box and say, I'm Christian, 55% of them would answer in a survey that they believe that Jesus is coming back to life. And with that belief, okay, with that
I'm sorry to
line of
interrupt.
thought.
It's that high. Like
Yeah.
that number is that high, 55%.
Oh, sorry. And I said that wrong. It's not 55% of Christians. It's 55% of people in this country. In this country, the population.
Wait.
Yeah.
Even
Mhm.
non-Christians would
Correct.
say Jesus is coming. How are they non-Christians if they're saying Jesus is
There
coming?
are some non-Christians, and this is according to I can pull up the link, you know, if we really need to, but this is according to
No,
a
you don't
Pew
have to. I'm
Research
just-
Center. Yeah, they conducted what they called a religious landscape study across tens of thousands of various demographics throughout the country. And it's, you know, how do you identify? What do you believe? All of your very individual beliefs under your religion. And 55% of people in this country, I mean, the wide majority of those are Christians, right? Like there is huge correlation there. But it's, they believe that Jesus is going to come back to life. Now, my background is that I grew up here in Oklahoma, and I was raised very, very fundamentalist evangelical Christian. And I am not alone in that here in Oklahoma where I am. Yeah. And so I was raised with like full-on sermons and lectures about Armageddon or the end times or when Jesus returns. And I've worked through all of, you know, the personal baggage with all of that. And I've come out on the other side, you know, and I talk about my deconstruction journey a lot online. That's kind of the background of my content, you could say. But what really struck me when I started deconstructing was how harmful and hateful, as you put it well earlier, Christian Zionism is without even realizing it. Okay. Because we grow up in these environments as children being told to support the land of Israel being given to the Jewish people at all costs. And the Palestinians aren't even mentioned. There's no storyline where they're involved. They're not even falsely, you know, equated as the aggressors, etc. So the concept of, I'll wrap it up here, you know, going back to 55% of people in this country believe that Jesus is coming back to life. In order for that to happen, according to biblical theology, in order for him to have the second coming, there's like a very key role that the Jewish people play. And that the role that they play is that they return to the land of Israel, they establish the temple in Jerusalem, and a couple of other things. But one of the points that I really try to get across here is that none of this is like Christian mythology viewing the Jewish people favorably. It's very inherently anti-Semitic. And so that was kind of like why I started talking about it online, because a lot of people in this country are just blindly supporting, they're manipulated into supporting this movement without even understanding the historical aspect of what Zionism actually means from a Christian lens, which was originally very anti-Jewish. Like at its core, it results in like the book of Revelation, which is what we're talking about when we're talking about Christian theological. It's actually called eschatological, which is the study of the end times. Yeah. Whenever we have that lens and we're looking at the book of Revelation, thousands and thousands of Jewish people are essentially required to be sacrificed is the very nicest way I can put it, in order for the Christian church to be one with Jesus again. And so it's incredibly harmful. It's incredibly harmful in the real world results in the consent for us providing arms and money to Israel for what it's doing in Palestine. And then it's also harmful to the Jewish people because it's the undercurrent there is very anti-Jewish. So it's just a mess of hate that I certainly didn't know when I was a Christian. I was just like, oh yeah, I'm 13 years old and I'm being told to take a geopolitical stance about something in the Middle East. Yeah, let's go. Absurd, absolutely absurd on its own. And then of course, the more I've dug outside of the environment I was raised in, I'm realizing like how deep the manipulation goes, how harmful such an ideology is, and how honestly fear-based is what it is. Because we're so taught in that environment, in the really intense evangelical environment, to view the entire world from a lens of fear, okay, which is truly the root of any kind of hatred or bigotry, okay, is fear of whatever. And it really plays on that in such an environment. It really plays on fear. And so you then end up with this hope and this false belief that there's going to be some beautiful reckoning and end times where all of the very valid suffering that people of all walks of life, are experiencing, it'll all be justified. It'll all be reckoned with when Jesus comes back. That gives us a glimmer of hope that things will all work out and then we'll be okay and we don't have to struggle as much. But the requirement for that is all of this violence.
Yeah. So, all right. So my mom, they were in a Christian church, Baptist. It never really took with me. I didn't quite get it. I was the kid that was like, yeah, but why? The pastor was like, you have a very interesting kid here. I wasn't necessarily antagonistic against it. It just didn't entirely make sense. It's, as you point out, it's fear-based, right? They used to do revelations where they would talk about how everybody was effectively going to die or be raised to Jesus and Satan was going to take dominion over the earth. And I'm like, whoa, this is intense. Because it's based on this idea of where God is effectively threatening you, a God that is supposed to be omnipotent, eternal, immortal, etc., created you, knows what your fortune is going to ultimately be, and yet is creating you, some people with the potential of spending eternity in hell. Like, that's just a mind-blowing concept for me to get. And in regards to the Jerusalem thing, yeah, you're right. They would say the Jews killed Jesus, and they would use that as a black market for hating Jews. But they would support the Jews in Israel with the idea that, well, you need the Jews in order to bring back Jesus, in which case all of the Jews are going to be extinguished. Most of the planet is going to be left, and the good Christians are going to go up to Jesus. And it's like, whoa, that's intense. Like, you're effectively talking about the majority of the world being sacrificed. And that is something that you are breeding red heifers to try to bring to fruition and giving Israel billions of dollars in order to get rid of the Palestinians, in order to bring this vision to life. That's terrifying. Like, that is very dark. And I think, to your point, a 13-year-old in no way can understand the ramifications of any of that. And yet, this is what a 13-year-old is being indoctrinated with. When did you get to the point of recognition of like, whoa, this is a bit over the top? Like, what age were you? When did you finally, what was the thing where you hit your head on, where you were like,
yeah,
this is not right?
Oh, it's almost embarrassing. It took so long, but everyone's journey is different,
Yeah, and you're raised with it. They put it this way: most people stick with that stuff their entire life.
That's true.
You have family members who are indoctrinated as a kid. They say, "I think for myself." It's like, dude, they beat that into you when you were a child, and you just stuck with it. You're not thinking for yourself. You didn't choose that. You were imposed. It's a difference. So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. I do try to give myself some grace for essentially being, even as a teenager, not necessarily seeing through the honestly the hatred that was spewed, or that was again rooted in fear. So it was also very much reinforced at home for me, and a lot of fundamentalist religion is reinforced at home, and that kind of doubles the intensity of such a religious background, religious upbringing. So I also, for a little bit of context, the reason that it was so pervasive kind of in my worldview is because I also went to the Bible-based private school affiliated with a mega church here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I grew up. So it was just all the time. I mean, I was just 24/7. I lived and breathed the Bible, essentially. And at the same time, I was also a very voracious reader. I was very curious. I was a little, school nerd, academic. And I went off to college. And as I was in college, I started reading more and more. Well, I started reading more theology, Christian theology, like C.S. Lewis and A.W. Tozer.
Yeah.
These really like deep thinkers about why Christianity makes sense, right? Well, I found that the more I followed that curiosity, the less the logic held up. And I kind of just had a breakdown of what we call the cognitive dissonance of trying to square absolutely everything in modern reality, in our way of life, the lived experience that we all go through, trying to square all of that with this 2,000-year-old book, give or take, 2,000-year-old book. And I was 21 years old when I remember like walking through campus, college campus, with the recognition that I was no longer a Christian anymore. And I kind of point to that moment as the beginning of my deconstruction journey. And it really hit hard. So one thing I talk a lot about, because a lot of the people who come to my platform have gone through this or are going through it, the deconstruction from we call it a high control religion that just really was so unhealthy. And we talk about how it looks different for everyone. Some people have a capital M moment like myself. But really what I like to try and talk about is how deep the personal identification goes. I didn't know not just whether or not I believed in God, I didn't know what to wear. I didn't know what kind of partner to look for. I didn't know how to build friendships without the lens of evangelical Christianity. And that to me is what really took a whole decade of, and it's still going, it's just a never-ending journey of self-discovery, which is kind of a beautiful part of life for all of us. Self-discovery.
Wait, real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt. That is fascinating to me. I mean, there's always a workable point of view that a person gets, and it could either be imparted or the person could kind of develop it and work it their way through. Like, what do I feel in this case? And it kind of shapes a point of view, or it can be imposed, right? This religion gives me a workable point of view. This political thing gives me a workable point of view. How did it go all the way to the level of clothing? I'm fascinated by that. So as a Christian, you dressed a particular way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are denominations that were much stricter than mine. I find it really uncomfortable when a lot of American Christians hate on Islam for wearing the hijab or the modesty that is required of women, and we do not have to get into that. But there are denominations that require, you've seen the long dresses that the women wear, okay,
Yes.
and they don't cut their hair. There's a requirement for the women to dress a certain way. So those are specific denominations. Mine was not quite that strict, but it was still a level essentially of modesty, and how I wasn't allowed to show my shoulders at school. And I mean, that's just a very basic dress code. But really what I meant by it had me questioning what I should wear was really, it started having me question my relationship with my own body, because the nature of the Christian point of view of the body is that it is inherently sinful and that it is inherently full of lust. And for women in particular in purity culture, we are not just responsible for our purity, but also for those of the male gaze, for not bringing our brothers in Christ to temptation.
Right.
So it just had me questioning at the very least, like, is my body sinful? Is my natural body, is there something wrong with it? Right? So there's a lot, it got to the point where at some point I remember like brushing my teeth and I was like, why am I doing this? It really breaks down an entire identity of how we move through this world, which can in the end be beautiful, because then you can start what I call reconstruction and rebuilding that identity and finding our authentic selves and who we actually are, what we want to stand up for, etc. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, effectively, who am I?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And again, that can be a beautiful process, but it honestly took 10 years of those very fundamental questions of who is Kayse, what do I believe, what do I want to stand up for, before I was even able to kind of look at the political landscape, right? Like it's kind of a survival mode for some people. I think it was for me, because I really had to question a lot of those very internal, deep questions. And then it's in the past couple of years that I was kind of looking around and I was like, okay, so now how can I move through this world? So now how can I go out there and be of service to people and help other people along this journey, which was so intense and many places dark for me, because I just had no guidebook anymore. I had no easy answers. This was hard. This was a hard process to question the indoctrination I grew up with. How can I help others do the same? And through this kind of self-educating process, through this curiosity that I've always had, as we mentioned earlier, I stumbled across like, wait. I want to say, I don't know if stumbled across is the right word. After October 2023, when this new kind of iteration of what is framed as the conflict between Israel and, Palestine, it kind of came to more of the forefront of a lot of people's perceptions again. It reminded me like, oh, I was told to be a Zionist, right? Like it was that word Zionism. I was like, well, I was a Zionist. I grew up as a Zionist. What does this mean? So it was kind of like another key point that I had to really question, like, okay, so what do I believe? What are the facts? What is the information that's actually available that's not skewed through this fundamentalist ideology? Because let's keep in mind, I had to teach myself science and history as an adult. Okay, like I didn't know what evolution really was about, okay, until I was an adult and learned it myself. So I did this same kind of self-education for what's going on in Palestine. And I had to question, like, okay, what do I believe? This is just a personal part. Not everyone who goes through deconstruction becomes an atheist, but I ended up an atheist. So it's like, I don't believe there's some God that gave the Jewish people this specific slot of land. So what do I believe? All of these different questions that really challenged this whole inner dialogue of what I used to believe and what I'm trying to establish for myself now. And it just got me down this rabbit hole of all of the ways that Zionism is pushed through church congregations without the actual details, without the actual facts, to manufacture this entire world of consent, this religious skew to a geopolitical conversation. And yeah, that's kind of like the rabbit hole I've been in this entire year.
That's fascinating. I'm sitting here thinking through it. That's fascinating. It's a few thoughts. Christianity and atheism are basically the same. They're not the same, but they're two ends where there's still this kind of intense belief either that there is no God or that there is a God and there's all of these other things that are associated with God, if that makes sense. It's interesting that I understand why you would, at the point where you say, okay, I've been lied to my entire life. They've lied to me. And you come to this realization of, okay, well, now that I've been lied to, well, what is true? How do I know what's true? How do I know who I am, since this was my identity for all of these years? That is fascinating. I can understand this kind of, this deconstruction and then this rebuilding into who is Kayse. What do I actually believe in? And not just what do I believe in? What is my workable point of view of the world? Like, how do you define what's right and what's wrong when this has been taken away from you? You now have to structure it on your own. And when you're looking at the Palestinian issue, because you could have come to any worldview, you could have said, yeah, the Palestinians are attacking the Israelis and they need to defend themselves. Plenty of people end up in that kind of weird space It's like, dude, but they're murdering all of these people. They're starving 2 million people. Yeah, but the Palestinians deserve it. You'd be shocked. There was 1 or 2 people on the channel that would even do some nonsense like that. But you didn't come to that conclusion. Your thing was, okay, I see the origin of this. I see what they are doing. I was raised in this kind of Zionistic belief set that I found to be incorrect, or at the very least to be deeply problematic and deeply injurious, especially when you're growing up with it. Meaning, I'm sorry, I'm rambling. You're structuring your world as you go along, considering this other part of your world has just fallen away. And you're coming up with a new workable point of view of the world as you recreate yourself. That is fascinating. That is heavy to have to go through. And I guess I never really thought of it being that. Yeah, I never thought of it being that much, that thoroughly jarring of an experience in the way that you're explaining it. But I can see how it would be if that's your life, that's your identity. Your identity has been stripped away. Mm-hmm. Wow. I would imagine you've met other people along this journey who've dealt with this also. How have they, oftentimes people appreciate when somebody else is enunciating something that they themselves are experiencing. What has been the response to you explaining this? What was your family's response? I mean, I would imagine your family was horrified.
That's a good question. Thank you. The family one is tricky. I'm not as close with my parents as I would like to be, and family's hard for a lot of people right now. I think a lot of the family dynamics in this era is just getting reshuffled, and we're really challenging those traditional narratives. Yeah. So I'm certainly not alone in that. But like kind of half of my family doesn't really know about my online presence. And then those who do are generally supportive, even if they don't agree with every little thing I say. But as far as the community I've built on this platform, so like my first YouTube video was on my birthday this year, February 9th. And we have grown to, I think, 36,000 subscribers in those 7 months. And I have been so grateful, first and foremost, for the community members that I have met along the way, the friends we make along the way, right? And so I have found a lot of really, okay, so I'll tell it this way. I get a lot of hate mail, which, you have a public platform as well. It's part of the game. Yeah. A lot of hate mail. I'm not talking about very chill stuff, so I get it. I'm talking about pretty controversial stuff. I get it. But I would say maybe like 10% of the emails I get are incredibly heartfelt and kind messages of thanks. Like, hey, I've been trying, as you were just saying, I've been trying to put a voice to this, or I'm just starting on this journey of deconstruction and I'm afraid of hell, and I don't know how to let go of my belief of hell. Or, hey, I have come to this realization that I'm not a Christian anymore. How do I tell my wife, who is still a Christian? Those are the really meaningful conversations that have meant a lot to me. And it's been really beautiful. And all different, again, what I was saying earlier, all different versions of this. Yeah. There are people who were Jehovah's Witnesses and they deconstructed. There are people who were like a different denomination of Christianity, or just really, really, really Catholic. And I think, what you were saying earlier, like, you're right. I do call out the atheist community who end up kind of on the far right of the spectrum, politically speaking, because I think there's a general, a lot of it is still fear-based, but there's a general, there can be a tendency to swing all the way to the other side of the pendulum. Yes. And kind of be wrapped around kind of what you were saying earlier about atheism and Christianity being on the two ends of a spectrum. And it's like, they can be wrapped around a dogmatic approach to science, which science is not a belief system. Science is a process. It is a scientific method. Exactly. But it is very easy to go from a high demand religious environment and just like latch on to science as your new version of that and feel very justified. So there's a lot to this whole concept of deconstruction. And when you start talking about the political aspect, It can be, everyone falls into different camps as well. I think the large majority of people on my platform and my community and myself ended up very, very distrusting of mainstream establishment. Okay, because Christianity is technically the mainstream narrative in this country. Yeah. So that's kind of like where I ended up. I would not call myself a liberal, like further left than that, which is just a general, I mean, being on the left means you believe in community ownership of property, right? Not necessarily I'm a Democrat.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah, I can't stand Democrat. In fact, I don't like either,
Yeah.
to be bluntly honest with you. I tend to be far on the left.
Yeah.
spectrum thing.
Yeah.
So no, I get you on that. Now I'm fascinated by this. Like my uncle, like I'm not an atheist, not a Christian, I have belief in like consciousness stuff, but I can't denote
Honestly,
that
same.
as a religion thing. And I gotta be honest, I think the more honest just thing is I just don't know.
Yeah, same.
And I can be okay with I don't know. I had a friend of mine who I remember her and I were getting mani-pedis one day. I like spas. And I was like, I know you don't believe this stuff. I was like, why do you do this? Why do you invest yourself into this? And she says, well, if I didn't believe in this, what else would I believe in? Effectively, she was staring into the void and backed away from the void and was like, I need something to latch onto. This is too heavy to just not believe in anything. I had an aunt-in-law who also was very religious. And I would call what they were involved in was a cult. They would call it Christianity. We can disagree on what it was, but gotten to the point of ostracizing other people. Like the kids can't listen to music because that's worldly. The kids can't play cards because that's the devil laughing at you as you play cards. And of course, she had a husband who was not that way and ended up creating these huge divisions in the context of the marriage. Like, this stuff is destructive. I mean, the story that you talked about where you said the person was, I'm afraid of going to hell. That's terrifying. That sucks. And this is an argument I've had with my mom. It's like you're leveraging a person's belief set against the unknown. And you're creating this kind of fear thing within the context of the unknown of burning in hell eternally, unless you believe what we're telling you to believe in. That's a hell of a thing to do to a child. Where that child grows up with that thing stuck in their minds. That's rough. That is rough. What did you tell that person when they said, be like, look, I don't think I'm a Christian. I don't think I buy this stuff entirely, but I don't want to go to hell. What was that? I know you can't go into the entirety of the conversation, but I am curious on how did you counsel a person who says something like that? That's so esoteric.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting that you ask it in such a way. How did I counsel that person? Because I have felt that I just have become in this position of people asking me for advice. And, you have to say, I'm certainly not a therapist. I'm not a licensed professional, all of that. But I think there is something too when, as you can probably relate, when you come online and you have a field of expertise and you know what you're talking about, people do come to you with all of these questions. And that has been both challenging and just very impactful for me, because that's why I do this. At the end of the day, if there's one person who is leaving a high demand religion and they find peace and their journey of deconstruction is a little bit easier than mine, it's a win. It's all a win, right? So those are the most impactful moments for me. That's all I'm here for. And so for that person in particular, the question of I'm afraid of letting go of my belief in hell, I mean, really what I get to at that point is like, who is that belief serving? Because that's something that I ask all of us at any point, especially in today's climate. That belief that you have, who is it serving? Is it someone with a lot of power and money? Okay. Is the belief in upholding the greed of capitalism, is that serving you? That's just a genuine question. That's a really good starting point for any of our beliefs that might feel uncomfortable, is who is this serving? Who is the belief that I would be happiest serving a husband in the kitchen and popping out children? Who is that really serving? And it's not a judgment thing. It's sitting with our internal beliefs and becoming aware and recognizing, hey, this might have been intentionally programmed into my subconscious to serve someone else's purposes. Okay? Because, and the difficulty with that is kind of recognizing like, oh, maybe there's part of my identity that isn't really me. And that's a scary thought to have that awareness. So what I asked this person is like, is it serving you to believe in hell? Is there something about believing in hell that makes you a better person? Or do you think that you can still be a good, kind, honest person without the threat of an eternity of torture? Do you think that this makes you a good person is really what I got down to? Or do you think maybe your fear is holding you back from being your true self? And I truly believe this. I think people are genuinely good.
Yeah.
And it's just when they're afraid and these systems don't allow them to live fully and freely and healthily, we're lashing out, right? And so I remember kind of asking that person, who does the belief in hell serve? Okay, is it a belief that's just keeping you in line so that religious leaders can tell you what to do? Because that's another part of this is the hierarchy of beliefs in an organized religion. You're going to church on a Sunday and you are outsourcing. I'm not talking about you personally, but we are outsourcing our sense of morality. We are allowing someone else to tell us what is right or wrong according to this book. We are allowing someone to interpret this entire reality and tell us what our values are and tell us what these scriptures mean and who is truly a believer and who is technically not. Okay? We are outsourcing our sense of morality and our critical thinking. And one of the more tense questions I ask people who are more combative toward my content is, hey, do you really need the Bible to convince you that murder is wrong, for example? Do you really need your pastor to convince you not to steal? And they'll and it's like, it's not a judgment thing, but I'm trying to get to the point across, like, no, I think you're actually a good person and you didn't need that book in the first place. Like, you didn't need someone to tell you not to commit harm. And so I think that when we release our need for the belief in hell, for example, we realize like, oh, I actually didn't need that the whole time. That's kind of like what it boils down to.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, please continue.
I think that I have discovered that I might be a bit of a consequentialist when it comes to my philosophical worldview, which is what is the point of this? Who is this serving? Because that's something that I talk about a lot, because there are Christians on my platform. And I will say like, for example, I will say, I am an atheist, but I will stand in solidarity with a Christian who is standing up for what's right. Because at the end of the day, I don't care what you believe. I care what it translates to. Right. So in that sense, I guess I'm a bit of a consequentialist.
What is the biggest opposition that you get on this? I'm super, because you said 10% of the emails are really heartfelt, and that would mean that a lot of them are not. And I have this sneaking suspicion that these people were raised into something, and they believe they're thinking for themselves. Like, for example, I'm in Indonesia as we speak. I can hear the prayers coming. I love the prayers in the mornings and in the evenings. Women wear hijabs, some don't. Same thing in Malaysia. You had some in burqas, some wear hijabs, some didn't. You just kind of had this mix of people that were interacting together. In Christian societies, they oftentimes latch themselves onto these religions very strongly. They were raised in the church. Their moms took them to church or dads took them to church, and they did this for the entirety of their childhood. They grow up and they say, well, I'm choosing to be a Christian. And I would point out, no, you're not. You were raised in this way. You were indoctrinated in this way. You were programmed to be this, and you just stuck with the programming. You never had this moment where you were external from it all and said, I'm going to choose this or I'm going to choose that. They never see the difference. They're fish in water. So when they're attacking you and you know they're fish in water, what is their biggest issue? Is it just because you've ripped yourself away from it? Is it because you're kind of making this channel about, look, I had to deconstruct from this. This is harmful. This is not something that we should effectively be beating into our kids. What is their main opposition to you when they're complaining?
Yeah, that's a good question. It kind of depends on the audience. So I kind of call myself a spiritual atheist sometimes, in the sense of kind of what you were saying earlier. Like, I think there's a lot more room for the nature of consciousness and a very meditative and almost a spiritual way of moving through the world, even though I don't see the evidence for a creator being is really what I mean by atheist. I also am technically an agnostic, right? I don't know. I don't see the proof, whatever. And so it's interesting because I would say the majority of the pushback on the things I say are from religious fundamentalists, mostly Christian, also a lot of Muslims, particularly because of when I talk about because when I talk about Christian Zionism, I do a lot of trying to push back against the harmful narrative of painting Islam as somehow worse than Christianity. And so there's this whole tension of, I guess it's not really much combative messages from Muslims. It's more like a lot of proselytizing, a lot of evangelizing, trying to get me to see the way of Islam. And I get a lot of that in Christianity as well. But the majority of the more hateful pushback I get is certainly fundamentalist Christian, hands down. But I also get it from a lot of atheists who don't like that I stand up for the Palestinians, who don't like that I stand up for trans people. There's a camp of right-wing atheists who kind of don't like that I'm out here calling myself an atheist, and I'm a little bit more of a liberation-focused slant to it. So I get a lot from all different, a lot. It's controversial conversations. So I get it.
That's wild. That's just wild to me. These people can't just say, Kayse is doing her own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No. I think also, I hate to say it, but I think also there's part of being a woman with such intense opinions being vocalized. That's part of it, because a lot of them also have a gender-based tone to them.
They're men. They're men. Yeah. What is this woman telling me to do? Why is this woman talking about this? How dare she?
I know.
She's supposed
how dare
to be,
she?
Hidden behind a wall somewhere. Wow, that is mind-blowing to me. From your point of view, and what's the Christian Zionist thing? When you extricated yourself from this, you could see Zionism on some level for what it is. I mean, granted, it's different than, let's say, how Jen was raised. It's raised in a different shade, a different color. But it's still the slavish devotion to Israel, even if the reason and rationale is for the destruction of the world. It's still this kind of weird slavish devotion to Israel. Did you guys, when you were growing up, have a political component to that, or was this purely in a religious context?
Well, that's one thing that I mention, even outside of Christian Zionism specifically, is how deeply political my religious upbringing was. I mean, I was in high school when Obama came to office, and in my Bible class at school, we had a genuine conversation about whether or not he was the Antichrist. What did we do? Yeah.
Are you serious?
Oh, 100%. All of these very political conversations were happening. So there's this premise that because pastors or religious leaders from the pulpit legally technically can't endorse specific political parties or candidates, that there's no political conversations. Well, that's not a rule in the Bible class. That's not a rule in my chapel that we when we met in high school every Thursday morning. We were having all kinds of political conversations. It was deeply political, and Zionism was one facet of that. Interestingly, it wasn't really painted as political, right? Zionism specifically was not painted as anything other than this is what the Bible says. So that's what we do. We quote Genesis 12:3, I will bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. That means Israel. That means we support Israel no matter what. That's it. That was the end of the conversation. And so that's why, what I was saying, these past couple of years, I started hearing the word Zionism again. And I was like, wait, hold on. I know it. I remember that word. Had to do some digging. And it's like, oh, we were being told to take a geopolitical stance at 13 years old. And so, but even outside of Zionism, deeply, deeply political indoctrination in that religious upbringing, which is why I kind of push back on a lot of the comments or, a hate that I get, which is just because you were raised a Christian conservative doesn't mean that's what Christianity means. It does. It does. Like on such, if we have such a wide overlap of the percentage of conservatives and the percentage of Christians overlapping, like there's something deeper going on in that indoctrination process. And it was deeply political. It just was.
Mike Huckabee, Hegseth,
Mm-hmm.
like all of these people who are in the Trump administration at this point, many of those people are Christian Zionists, lunatics, degenerates, in the way that they effectively don't care about life, which is mind-blowing. You know, it's like, how are you a Christian while simultaneously okay with babies being shot and then called dangerous in order to justify the murder of babies? And yet, in their minds, this is somehow godly and perfectly okay in a religious, political context. It's bizarre. Kayse, you are fascinating. That is a hell of a journey to go through. And I guess for me, I never went through that specific journey. Because for me, it never was, my family was religious. And I even went to religious elementary schools. But even then it didn't stick. Like I would have straight A's and I think I got kicked out. It's just like, it just never clicked. It never made sense to me. I remember one day our teacher told us, "You're all going to hell." Now mind you, were like 8. She got pissed off at something we were doing in class. She's like, "You're all going to hell. You're all going to hell. You're going to be on that train going to hell." No, that's a hell of a journey, especially when you make it your identity and you hold on to that identity up until the age of like 21 years old, where you are formed as an adult. You've gone through school, everything else, and you're now in the world functioning in this way with that particular identity. And then it completely and entirely unravels. And you have to recobble that back together. That is fascinating. That is fascinating. Last point of view, if there's something I didn't ask, if it's something you want to get across, please, you have the stage.
Sure. Well, first, let me just say thank you. This has been incredibly insightful. You're an excellent interviewer. I will say...
I interrupted you far too much in this.
No. That means it's organic. I love it. Yeah. I will say that the reason I got started building a platform to kind of share these perspectives, show the research I've done, etc., is because with the new United States administration, I'm certainly not alone, but in seeing the rise of Christian nationalism, I became genuinely concerned. And I think that for a lot of people who were raised in these deeply religious and therefore deeply political environments, we started seeing some signs of the new United States administration veering toward becoming more intertwined openly, not just background money going on, openly identifying with Christian nationalist tendencies.
Yes.
And I have been concerned, and that is kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing. I would have loved to just, buy a cabin in the woods and hang out the rest of my life, but I couldn't. And as you know, when you feel called to do something, you got to do it. Yeah. And Christian Zionism is a facet, I think, of Christian nationalism that is particularly more just openly harmful and violent. But it's all the same conversation, which is this intertwining, this very intentional and evident intertwining of politics and religion in this country that I'm very concerned about. And I think that really the church congregation members who are just blindly going along with this, I think there's a trickiness there. Like there is a level of accountability who are supporting for those who are supporting all of this harm and violence and hate. But I know the people that I was raised with and grew up with in those environments. And I consider a lot of them in a lot of ways victims of this $1 trillion propaganda machine. So it's very important to me. I even try and rein in my community who are amazing and supportive and perfect and love them. But there's this tendency to continue the process of othering, of us versus them, right? With Christian conservatives or just anyone on the other side of any argument that you have. And really what I would love to get across always and forever is the shared humanity And the fact that we are all in this, and the more we have this divisive rhetoric, I can call out Christianity all day long. I can talk about it in my sleep. But I will stand in solidarity with Christians, the individuals, the people, the humans behind it. Okay? I think there's a level of awareness that I would love for us all to come to, which is that we're all facing this stuff together, and it is scary out there. And people who are kind of swallowing the lies the most are in a lot of ways in more pain than us. That's really tricky. I'm not like trying to not hold people accountable for like the way they vote or, you know, the way they move through this world. It's just a matter of recognizing that we're all in this together, and I want to kind of find a way out. I really do.
No, I accept that. I don't know a way out. I think it all
me neither.
before we get a way out. I mean, I think it's a mechanical process. I think the country, because look, I agree with you. It is a very bizarre thing for a president that seems to be in the pocket of somebody else. And one of my guests the other day, he was like, I think he's being blackmailed. And it's like, I don't know if he's being
100%.
blackmailed, but I mean, the previous administration was almost as obsequious. And it's like, if you think about it, okay, well, Joe Biden did pretty much anything that Netanyahu did. In fact, Channel 4, when they did the review after the Biden administration failed, they were talking behind the scenes. Basically, some of the things that the Israelis politicians were saying, it's like, thank God that God saw fit to put Joe Biden in office. He didn't push us on anything. He didn't ask us to do anything. He allowed the killing to just keep going and going and going. We thought we'd be able to murder babies for a few months, but with Joe Biden, he allowed us to do it for years. And of course, that breeds impunity of action, not to mention you have policy to overthrow Syria, which allowed attacks on Iran, the expansion of this kind of greater Israel that they're trying to create with the US being firmly behind it. The thing is, though, a lot of this stuff is political. They may come up with a justification for it, and they may wrap people into ways of supporting it. But there's a political ethos in the American political structure, Democrat and Republican, that is perfectly okay with having this colony being our rogue stalking horse. And it's not rogue at all in this case. It's just our ability to show influence within the context of the Middle East. And so they wrap it into all of these things as if it's this kind of religious argument. This isn't a religious dispute. It's a land dispute. They want the land. And so I feel you on this, like the way that they entrance the public by religiousizing it. And that I butchered that word, by making it mystical in a way that it's not. No, I totally agree with you.
It's manufactured consent.
It is manufactured consent. I just can't believe, though, that the people, these are people that raise their kids. These are people that love their kids, meaning the people who you grew up with. I know they love their kids. I know they love their parents. I know they have relationships with each other. How does that not extend? Especially even if you're talking about a Christian Zionist, Christian is built into that. The poor, the sick, these are elements of Christianity that are indivisible from the premise of it. Like Jesus overturned the moneylenders, right? How do you ignore that in the context of the way you operate in the world? And then you have the Zionist part onto it. And it's like, okay, well, the Zionist part ignores all of this other stuff that we're supposed to learn as Christians. How does that? I just don't get how that works and how in their minds they justify that. That's the part that is wild to me. All of these elements of Christianity that goes into this notion of progressivism of sorts, in the truer sense of the word, not in the political sense of like Democrats, just
right.
The basic elements of humanity. I want to treat people like I want to be treated, and the poor, the sick, etc. All of these things need to be taken care of as human beings. It makes us better people, and not to mention God likes it. And then ignore all that when, hey, Israel put 300 bullets in a 12-year-old. Yeah, fair game. I mean, it's Israel. We have to support Israel. How does one negate completely the other in this case? How did they square this in your church? I'm sorry. I know I said that was going to be the end. Just one last question. How did they square this logic? Because I remember I met this woman who had a sign saying Obama is evil because Obama likes gay marriage. And I'm like, what? It's not that I even support Obama, right? It's just this notion that you're making a distinction between Romney and Obama, and of all the things, the car elevator, the guy being rich, the guy calling half of the country, the the worthless eaters and all the stuff, but you're focusing on the gay marriage. That's your focus. That's the thing that you're focusing on. How is Christian Zionism ignoring the Christian part and raising the Zionism part to the point where it ignores all of these other aspects of Christianity that are actually positive? Or do they ever square that?
Yeah, it is honestly heartbreaking to watch people just buy into this propaganda machine that allows for this genocide to happen. And the truest answer is probably I'm not completely sure, but my gut tells me that it's very much part of an intentional. So there are correlations between the nature of religious fundamentalism in a nation and like material scarcity in a given nation. So the more that essentially fascism or material scarcity gets clamped down on this country, my prediction is that religious fundamentalism will rise. There's a direct correlation there. And so the less we keep people in this country educated, the more we force them to work, the less they're able to spend time with their loved ones or people who are different than them, the more we keep them in these social media echo chambers without ever challenging their beliefs, right? The worse quality of life we give people in this country, which is still, by and large, we're incredibly privileged compared to the rest of the world. But the more we clamp down control, the easier these people are to control. Right. And so I think there are leaders in this people in power in this country who are using that, the nature of late stage capitalism, kind of constricting all of us and not giving us access to education and resources, et cetera, to continue manufacturing this consent. And so when people are more focused on putting food on the table, they're not going to question their pastor. They don't have time. They're busy. They're busy working 3 fucking jobs. Sorry, excuse me. They're busy working 3.
You can say fuck.
Yeah, sorry, we didn't talk about whether or not you swear on your channel.
But I do remember being in church, and I do remember this notion of these elements of Christianity. Taking care of the poor, taking care of the sick, ensuring the 10 Commandments: do unto others as thou should do unto you. Do not kill. Do not steal. Do not murder. Do not. You have a list of things, effectively, the basic instructions of being a human being in order to, and that's not purely a religious thing. There's behaviors that you take rationally because you want the world to be a particular way. So I get that, right? That's defensible. How does that get ignored? That's the part that blows me away, because that's an ethical issue. That's a moral issue.
True.
And you go to
Very
church with the notion of moral. How do I save my soul? A. Lincoln James used to be like, he used to sweat so hard and used to beg people to come to Jesus. And you could feel his pain as he tried to get people to come to Jesus. I used to appreciate that, right? It's like, I used to enjoy the preaching. I used to hate everything else because I didn't understand why these people are singing in this way to some mythical being. But in the case of this, though, it's amazing to me that they would say, we believe in Jesus, we believe in the Bible, we believe in the church. And then they would also say, it is okay to murder and starve 2 million people. That's mind-blowing.
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah.
Connection.
I think you're right. And it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. It's like, I do think that there is an inherent goodness to people. Okay. I think that we don't need to be told to care for our neighbor. Okay. I don't think we need to be told to not commit violence and harm. I think that we are innately good. I think that there is very traceable money behind the intertwining of politics and religion through the Family National Council or Council of National Policy. There was so much money poured into evangelical Christianity on behalf of the Republican Party, Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, all of these televangelists, money to shift the narrative of what you were talking about, those core, what I would say, human values, to shift it into an us versus them narrative. Originally, white supremacy, then eventually also women, then eventually also gay people. They're always they have to have an other, they have to have a them to be an us, and it's this way of garnering control and power. But I guess the easiest answer to this is all the money behind convincing these pastors to teach in a certain way. Pastors can download an app that plugs them into the narratives and specific messages that the Republican Party wants them to say. Like it's totally pervasive and it's very intertwined.
Kayse, this has been a fascinating interview. No, it really has. Look, I'm fascinated by other people's experiences, like how they process the world and the things that they go through in the context of processing the world, especially in the context of identity and how that identity is shaped. And when you get a situation where that identity is broken in many respects and have to be cobbled back together and trying to figure out, okay, who am I? Beyond all this other stuff, who am I? Because I think there's a human element in people that goes beyond religion. I think religion's always surface. Like if I'm in Egypt and you see a kid watching porn, and you're like, okay, well, religion's the overlay. He got needs, right? he's watching it, despite the religion saying this is, not great. You shouldn't be doing this. This is horrible. God hates this, et cetera, et cetera. And yet there he is. And or you have a guy walking saying, "You're in America." I said, "Yeah, from America." And in very broken English, like, "I want to go to America to have sex with women." It's like the religion's there, but the religion is an overlay from who he is, just as a guy, as a man, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have had to effectively acknowledge that what you've been told. God, man, this puts me in mind of, I guess, my own political identity thing, where you reach this point where you realize, oh my God, I've been lied to. And you become who you are, almost as a basis of what the lies that you were effectively told and the renunciation of those lies. No, it's fascinating. I appreciate this. Thank you for joining me for this. Kayse Melone. And I want to make sure I get it right. Kayse Melone. She runs the Kayse Melone Show, described as a podcast for free thinkers, free spirits, covering culture, religion, and politics. She broadcasts live Sunday and Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central. That's on YouTube, correct? YouTube and Spotify.
YouTube and Twitch.
And Twitch, the video game thing. Kayse, I appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you. This was lovely.
Safe. Enjoy the rest of your day, okay?
You too.
Bye-bye. All right. We have come to the end. We even got into a religious conversation. That's terrifying. Look, anywhere you go is where you're at when you're raising a kid. What I mean by that is, this is not efficient water stuff. You have to program a kid with something. You're dumping something into that kid. If you feed that kid ding-dongs and hot dogs for breakfast and lunch, okay, you're teaching that kid something. That kid is learning something in that. If you make the kid a vegetarian, that kid is learning something. You're programming that kid. Any way you look at it, there's no way out that box. The catch becomes, how do I program this kid in a way with a workable point of view where they can develop safe, sound, whole, with a sense of self, that eventually they can get to a point where their workable point of view allows them to define who they are in a healthy way. It's not the easiest thing in the world because environment often creates a certain degree of reality. I know parents who think, well, teaching the kid the Bible is somehow good for that kid. Those parents and I would disagree. And I know from their point of view, well, I chose this. God is great. They need something workable point of view. Look, you can instill values in your child without giving them this inherent fear of hell. And truth be told, they may end up choosing a religion anyway, left to their own devices. Who knows? Sometimes people need what they consider to be structure in their life. Some people choose the military. They give them structure. Some people choose a family. Some people just kind of work it out on their own as they operate through the world. Some people are like me who just never took to it. But, still, I'm not an atheist. And easily I've talked about OBEs, astral travel, this belief that there's something else, even though I don't know what that something else is. We get so familiar with life that it becomes, that we lose the magic in it, if that makes sense. It's an astonishing thing for anything to be in and of itself. But familiarity gives us this different impression of that magic, that amazingness associated with it. So no, I'm not convinced that rando stuff created all of this, even though, yeah, I get simplistic things can turn into complexity. No, it's fascinating. It's just, It's indoctrination. I mean, you're effectively indoctrinating your kid to something that is sadistic, where the kid doesn't even realize how sadistic it is until they get a certain age. And even then, they don't know how sadistic it is. They just think it's their political identity. It's like if you're black and you just vote Democrat. And it's like, why do you vote Democrat? Because I vote Democrat. And at some point you grow up and be like, whoa, why am I doing this? What value is this adding to my life? No, it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. I may start a religion aiming, probing, alien God worship. Oh, be careful. You don't want to get picked up in the middle of a field somewhere. You don't want to do that. They have science telling us nothing is real, the hologram. Yeah, but science has biases. Science is not a religion, it's biases. People may use it as a religion. I think those people are fucking idiots. It's a tool, no more no less. It's like saying, I believe in my hammer. Okay, I believe in my hammer to hit stuff in order to bang nails. Science is a tool for probing and understanding the physical environment. They are human beings, and like human beings, they have their biases built into it. This belief that only things that are physical exist. Okay, that's a belief set. That's not, the belief that your thoughts are only in your brain. That's belief. There's also a belief that these guys have that they don't even realize entirely are beliefs. That's just, they operate along with it. It's a tool. Use it as a tool, no more, no less. And what's weird, the further along it gets, the more uncurious they get, which is bizarre. Super bizarre. What do you think of protests in Indonesia? Never mind. Yeah, I'm not having somebody come to my door telling me to get butt naked. Mr. Thomas, I saw that you commented on those protests. You were against the government line on this. Ooh, I mean, dude, you were giving yourselves like $5,000 increase to live in Jakarta. I'm in Jakarta. Doesn't take $5,000 a month to live in Jakarta. Mr. Thomas, we need you to come with us. Like, what? Get butt naked, Mr. Thomas. Oh, God, no, they're going to get me. They're going to get me. No, I've seen the protests. So the protests in Jakarta, apparently they paused them because the police had a huge presence. They didn't necessarily want people to get hurt. In other parts of Indonesia is huge, by the way. So just because they're happening doesn't mean that they're happening near you. But in other parts, yeah, there were people got killed. Somebody apparently got hit by a police car. Fires were being set. People weren't wrong. I mean, it's immiseration of the working class, right? At some point, the working class is going to respond. And when they see a situation of just clear greed on just an ungodly scale, I mean, for God's sake, I've told you before, I don't typically eat eggs. I've been eating them here, weirdly enough. And this happened when I went to the clinic and they said, Mr. Thomas, would you like something to eat? Now, my initial response was no. I know how I am. I'm very choosy. And it is an awkward place to be in when somebody gives you food and you just sit there and look at it and you just don't eat it. It's awkward. It's very awkward. I have had bad experiences where I just would literally just not eat it. Be like, I'll pay you the money for it. This is a business exchange. I'm giving you money for this. So whatever I do with this is fair game. Even if I throw this in the trash, it's fair game for me to do that. That's not the way people entirely deal with that stuff. And they're like, you're not going to eat it? That's okay. No amount of pushing is going to make me eat that. So no. I was hungry that morning, and I said, okay, what do you got? And she said, well, we have chicken. She said, would you like it in curry? No, I don't like curry. Fried? Yeah, fried is fine. Rice? That's fine. An egg? Ugh, I don't eat eggs, but okay, I can put the egg to the side. I ate all of it, and it was great. It was great. Yeah. It's just different experiences, different places, I suppose. Christopher Newton. Thomas Jefferson also supported repeated revolutions. Ask Jones fans. They all cheer for it. That's different. That's different. What Trotsky wanted was this not permanent revolution at home, but permanent revolution in other countries. Meaning we need to take over the Baltics. We need to take over France, Germany, etc., etc., etc. He wasn't talking about this idea of having permanent revolutions internally. Jefferson was talking about what is the flower of democracy needs to be watered at times by revolution or something. I forget the exact Quote, he was talking about when government turns a 10 ear to the public as it does now, and government is no longer responsive to what the public wants, because at a certain point, governments get so much power, they no longer care or give a shit about what the public wants or needs. You have all of these elites who fatten themselves with the richness that is effectively being paraded by the population. They don't care. They don't give a shit about you. In Jefferson's mind, those are times where this needs to be burned down and redone. That you can't have this situation of a permanent government in perpetuity that never changes and never ends. At some point, that government is going to hit the skids, or at some point, that government is going to start accruing power in a way that turns the 10 ear to the public. He was talking about revolutions at home. Trotsky was talking about revolutions in other countries. There's a difference in those things. Christopher Newton, thank you, though. Kevin Wayne, let's see. She doesn't seem to understand that not all Christians hold a Zionist belief. In fact, they didn't come about until the mid-1800s. To be fair, Kevin Wayne, she didn't say all Christians. She specifically said Christian Zionists. She delineated. I even pointed out that we were raised Baptists. We weren't raised Christian Zionists. They're still considered Christians. You have Catholics. Catholics aren't necessarily Christian Zionists. So I hope you get, like, she didn't say that. I just want to be very specific. She didn't say all Christians were Zionists. She didn't say that. She didn't say that. You can hit her. Don't hit her. Hit her for what she says. Didn't say that. She did not say that, Kevin. Thank you. I appreciate it. I do appreciate the chat, but I'm just pointing out she didn't say that. Let's see. All right, right here. That all Christians are Zionists. We see the end of times. Since you guys read books, read the book of Revelations. I was raised in the church, for better or for worse. I used to be able to memorize like just massive amounts of the Bible. You'd be shocked by it. We've went through Revelations a few times over the course of, I don't know, 15, 16 years of being forced to go to church. It's terrifying depiction of the end. But if you really need to threaten, look, I take issue with this. You are taking something that is part of the most sensitive parts of life, death. Now, there are people who have OBEs who go out of body and they see people transition and all this other stuff. There are people who have lucid dream states where they would meet people who have passed over. All of these things take place. People have NDEs. But you still don't know as a flat fact, right? Like people who come back from these NDEs, people who do the out-of-body stuff, they will have a very sincere conviction of what things may be like, but you still don't know as a flat fact. And their experience doesn't really necessarily do anything for you, because at the end of the day, it's just belief, unless you are going to have that similar experience. You're taking something that is one of the most sensitive aspects of a person's experience, death. Their head hits the floor, they shit their last, their heart stop, their lungs stop. They are no longer here. Eventually, brain activity ceases, in which this reality frame they are no longer associated with, and they are other. And you are effectively saying you have a soul. Now, anybody who says an OBE, the energy body, you can see the energy body or feel it for yourself. And that soul will be tortured for eternity if you don't believe in our all-powerful, omniscient, omnipresent God. A God, by the way, who should have known that you were going to fuck up and be thrown into hell, which means you have this kind of evil God that built a soul for the sake of having it burn in eternal damnation after spending 6 years on earth, or 7 years. That's fucked up. All right? At least I think it's fucked up. It's like, why is God this much of a maniac? Does God really need to be that much of a maniac? Now, if the objective is we want people to live a good life, and so we're going to scare the shit out of them with a noble lie, okay, even that's screwed up. That's a hell of a sales thing that's being done. That's a trick that you're playing on people in order to scare the shit out of them, in order to keep them to be part of your particular religious beliefs. I'm saying Revelations is similar. What she's talking about with Christian Zionism, or with Zionism in general, but Christian Zionism specifically, this idea that we're going to effectively burn and sacrifice all the Jews, sacrifice the planet, so a percentage of people can go and be with Jesus, leaving everybody else here on earth to rot, with the devil effectively roaming the earth. Okay, that's very godly. It's very godly. That is very godly. This lady is ignorant, Jamal. What happens here is religious extremism is bad. They manipulate the word of God like the Owls of the Dead, Talmud, not God word. But look, you must accept her experience. And you must see it from her point of view. You were raised in a religion. You are indoctrinated with that religion. That it is beat into you. You accept it as who you are, as an individual and as a person, as an identity. You find out, oh my God, I have been lied to. I don't believe what they're telling me in this. It's contradictory. It doesn't make sense. Yes, there may be good elements of it, but it's the lie that becomes the issue where the identity starts to break down because you realize it's full of shit. Not to mention you add in the Zionism part, which is effectively murderous. Why wouldn't you swing to the other end of the podium, right? Like, meaning the moment that you decentralize and you reject all of this stuff that has been lumped into you and beat into you over the course of your years of life and indoctrinated you and brainwashed, frankly, why wouldn't you swing to the other end of the spectrum? Think of it like a rebound date. You're in a marriage. You break up with your wife after 10 years. Your wife was Black, overweight, and you end up an American. You end up going to somebody who's thin, Austrian. And the exact opposite in every way. And your wife does the exact same thing and gets knocked up by a rando guy who is effectively the opposite of you. People swing to poles when the reality has been diminished and destroyed by finding contradictory information in the context of the reality. I don't fault her for that. She's not wrong. I've never had that experience. So for me, I just never cared one way or the other. So I can look at the items of Christianity that I think are decent while looking at the other items that I think are extremes and attacking. I don't have that hatred, that raw thing for it in that way. But she does, and I understand why. That's not a black mark on you. And you may say, well, she's attacking the religion. Maybe, maybe not. I guess the issue that you need to accept, though, is if you misguide somebody for the entirety of their life and they pop their head up and find out that you've done that, then you can't expect that person to stay on your team after they come to Jesus, for lack of a better word, and realize this stuff is nonsense. You're telling me how to dress. You're telling me how I'm supposed to look. You're telling me I'm supposed to engage with people. You're giving me a political identity. You're telling me all of these things. And then to make it even worse, the good aspects of it don't even inhibit the maniac, degenerate aspects that allow the murder of women and children and babies and starvation and rape and all this other stuff that's happening. He gives that stuff a pass. I don't blame her for that, Aris. And she's not ignorant for it. It's a rational act from my point of view. What happens here is religious extremism is bad and they manipulated the word of God. I get that. I get that. But it's her experience. And even calling it the word of God. I even know who wrote the book. Like, dude, you have to accept that not everybody is going to accept what you believe. And some people will question that belief and will critically go after that belief, especially if they feel like they've been betrayed and lied to. She was betrayed and lied to by parents, society, organizations, structure itself, all of those things. She rebelled. God bless her for doing so. Yeah, she may have rebelled in a way that pushed her to an extreme, but it's a life cycle. It's just life. It's just life. It's just life. It's just life. Fair enough. I accept that. But you got to accept her where she is. You defend your guests way too much. I defend my guests. Yes, of course I'm going to defend my guests. But Kevin, man, are we really doing this again? She did not point of fact. She doesn't seem to understand that not all Christians hold a Zionist belief. As a point of fact, she never said they do. Kevin, she never said they do. She never said they do. I'm just pointing out she never said it. If she did say that, I would have pointed out in the interview, well, wait a minute. My family was Baptist. They were not Zionists, even though they were Christians. I would have said so. Yes, I defend my guests. I would always defend my guests, as long as they don't go rogue, i.e. Scott Ritter. You defend your guests way too much. That's funny. Frank Frio, all of this emotional responses prove that religious institutions brainwash people. They do brainwash people. They do, right? I mean, that's the whole point. If you get them when they're kids, do you know that McDonald's, in some of their information, they have like, if you get a kid when they're 4 to 8, you have them for the rest of their life. Like you'll have them eating horrible shit for the rest of their life if you get them as kids. So make sure you get Happy Meals, you get gifts with those Happy Meals, you get all that stuff. Yeah, it's institutions want to exist. They need people to exist. They need to find ways to keep those people. And of course, parents want their kids to be like them. They look at the world. They say, this is what we think is right about the world. We learn about Jesus. We go to church. We worship Jesus. We speak in tongues or whatever the fuck they do. And they bring their kids with them because in their minds, this is a good thing. It's indoctrination. It's brainwashing. Parents don't look at it that way, but it is. But as I pointed out, anywhere you go, it's where you're at, right? If you're a Muslim family, Christian family, Mormon, atheist, whatever you are, you're going to program that into your child anywhere you go. Arise for Freeze, don't be too hard on her. You have to understand her experience, understand where she's coming from. Kevin Wayne, I appreciate you, but she did not say that. I swear to God, she did not say that. She's not ignorant for having a different point of view with you as Arise for Freeze. Christopher Newton, Red Axis, all of you, thank you. All of you, thank you. Right here. Her stuff is pretty old hat when you get right down to it. And the God damn it. And universities and universalizes her experience a lot. I only heard her constantly doing it. Wait a minute, let me say that one more time. Her stuff is pretty old hat when you get right down to it. And she universalizes her experience. That's fair. Yeah. I accept that. I heard her constantly doing it. I accept that. But what other framing could you speak from? Right? You grew up in a Christian Zion. I give you an example. When we were doing an interview with Jen, and Jen was talking about how it was to be raised as a Zionist. She may have universalized that experience, but that experience was true in general, meaning it is how they were raised. It's why you have these maniacs that act the way they do, who turn out to be fascists. They were born, raised to be that fascist lunatic that's in Israel right now. Jen was able to pull herself out of the programming for it. I think what she's pointing out is, look, I was raised this way. This is the way I was raised, as in a Christian Zionist. And obviously they had congregations. Obviously they had mega churches, like meaning it wasn't like her experience was isolated to her. She wouldn't be able to have a channel if her experience was isolated to her. If it was like, I was raised to believe in Zeus and Thor, and I travel dimensions. She might have like 5 people. It was like, I was raised that way too. The fact that she has a channel of that many people means on some level that experience, people can relate. Otherwise, she wouldn't have a channel, right? But no, I accept that. I do accept that, Kevin. I do accept that. That's not necessarily negative, though. Arise for Fries, you married a hoe, not a woman of God. Oh, God. That's mean. Arise for Fries. No, it's more complicated than that. It's more complicated, I swear. She's more complicated. And I was happy for her, believe it or not. It was weird. My mom still talks to her, which is even weirder. But I was happy for her. I mean, I felt like I was dying in that marriage. I literally felt like I was dying in that marriage. And we spent almost like a year not talking. She always wanted a kid. If I'm being bluntly honest, I never wanted a kid, even though I think I could have came around to having one, if that makes sense. And so her clock was ticking. That wasn't the reason why. I mean, I got sick at the point where I got sick. The marriage pretty much ended. But no, when we broke up, there was this level of excitement again. It's like this thirst for life. That thirst for life is paired with, you now have an empty house, as opposed to having these two rambunctious animals, or three if you had the wife. You now have this just kind of empty place. That's very weird to get used to. It's almost like the absence is a physical presence in and of itself. It's very bizarre. But you're free. Do what you want. Didn't have to have exchanges. Also, it was weird. Like, it felt like there was this constant responsibility. And it's a constant responsibility that you felt like you weren't quite living up to because you are in disagreement with this other person that you've been with for 10 years. I felt some kind of way with the way she acted. I would imagine she felt some kind of way with the way I acted. And yeah, when I got sick, it was over. She called it, she quits. But my point is, she's not wrong. That doesn't make her a hoe. She's a person. She has needs. Just like I'm a person, I have needs. And I ended up kind of stumbling into my new boo at that point. I don't know how she met hers, because at that point, I broke all communication off when we broke up. Got a divorce, called it quits, and just sealed it. I wasn't interested in her life, wasn't interested in anything about her. That's just the way I do relationships. When it's over, it's over. Just call shit today. I don't want to know anything about what's going on in your life from this point on. My mom makes it more complicated because loyalty is not my mom's strong suit. That's more my strong suit. And they developed the relationship over the course of the marriage, and so you're just kind of stuck with it. But I don't fault her for getting knocked up. In fact, I was happy that she did get a child because I know how much she wanted one, and whatever our issues, she would have made a fantastic parent. She was built for it. That's why she kept getting dogs. It's like she wanted a baby instead. So she found some random guy who wasn't worth anything. It's like, I need you for sperm. Thank you for your sperm sample. And she, single parent. Awful lot of pissy religiotards. Do you believe a real Christian would support Israel? Oh, that's an interesting question, Kevin. Kevin, that is a fascinating question. That is a fascinating question. That is a fascinating question. Because that's what I asked her, right? It's like, how does the Christian part get completely blown away for the Zionist part? How do you do that? You have all of these ideas of love thy neighbor, take care of the sick, take care of the poor, this humanitarianism that is supposed to be built into the whole religious ethos. You have this code of conduct that you're supposed to effectively deal with, all of which Israel violates every day on video: murder, rape, theft, etc. How do you support that as a Christian? How do you justify that as a Christian? That's a fascinating question. I don't have an answer for it. Jamal feared entrapment. Entrapment by who? You mean a honeypot? Who's on honeypots? All right. I am going to call this a day. I'm going to give a shout out to my guests. Caleb, Kayse, Shobhan Saxena. We did not have any horses, and yet we still got nearly 1,000 people watching. That's damn good. That's damn good. What do I mean by horses? There's certain people who, I'm sorry, I'm sweating because I have to keep the door shut and the air conditioner is loud. If I have the door open, you'll hear the prayers. I know I said this. I do mean it. I actually enjoy waking up to the prayers in the morning. Maybe not 4 a.m. That could be a bit much because they have almost like a sounding session where it's like 4 a.m. They're tuning up and then they scream. Ah! Yeah, it's intense, but very melodic. It's very good. And then you have them at night. I think the last one was like at 10 or 11 o'clock. And so if, or 9 o'clock, I guess, if the door is open, you guys are going to hear it. And I don't want the sound to intrude. So this is me sweating for you. I sweat for you. All right. We have come to the end. We've come to the end. Oh, by horse. Horse, I just mean somebody who, there's certain people who draws a crowd by definition, meaning they bring a crowd by definition of who they are. Alex Craner, he's one. Sloboda has become one. KJ has become one, kind of. It's like half horse, 3/4 a horse. Well, there are a few. Brian Berletic, he's another good one. That's the rub, though. You can have a damn good guest who's not a horse, but a damn good guest. And they just kind of grow. Like Sarah Bills, when she first came on the channel, she might have gotten 1,000, 2,000. The audience is like, why is she on the show? Why is she bringing a show? Today, you guys love her. She does damn good. Awesome show, Jamal. It was a good show, Wandy. Thank you for that. It was a good show. I thought it was good. I thought it was good. I am trying to be better at this week. I've been particularly good at questioning the guests and digging into what they do and hitting with things that matter in regards to the questions. So no, that I think I've done well this week. So always try to get better, right? All right, guys, we have come to the end. I am going to say like, I'm going to say share. I am going to say subscribe, which is Sarah Bills is the ultimate horse. Oh, don't say ultimate horse, but she's good. She's very good. And we're going to be doing a show. In fact, what's today? Today's Tuesday. Tomorrow, Mark Sloboda is going to be on. Okay. Somebody's going to get screamed at. Mark Sloboda is on. We also have a new guest. We have a new guest, actually. A general, colonel, or something. All right, Colonel Professor Greg Datis, Mark Sloboda. I'm going to have to get somebody for 7 o'clock hour. Most of it is booked. Thursday, Sarah Bills. I'm trying to get Matthew Ho to come on the show. I'm hoping he can join us, but we'll see. I'm also trying to get KJ on. I think he may be pissed. I hope he's not pissed. God, man, that sucked. It is very awkward. It's very awkward when you have one guest hit another guest and you have to balance the equation. And in balancing the equation, you try to let both speak their piece. Because just because they speak their piece doesn't necessarily mean that from their point of view, it's over. So we'll see. I'm hoping that is over. I'm hoping everybody is good. And I'm hoping everybody can just kind of like, all right, we had a boo-boo, we disagreed, and now we're moving on. I'm going to end it. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. Be nice and kind to the degree that you can be nice and kind. And I will see you early tomorrow morning. Have a good day, everybody.